my book page as well. So, all right.
Okay.
And we're live. Let me post up in the comments here. So for anyone joining us, if you have not already, if you go to streamyard.com/Facebook, give StreamYard permissions. That way, as you want to comment, as you guys tune in, we can see who's actually talking to us here. But thank you to everyone who wants to come and tune in and listen. But a huge thank you to Dito Abbott, who I had the privilege and the pleasure of spending 3 days standing right next to Dito as we were at Phoenix Fan Fusion in June. And one, for those who know Dito, he is awesome, just 100% awesome, wonderful person. But I felt like I got to learn so much from you, not as an author per se, but also as just how to market yourself, how to prepare your branding, how to think over a lot of things that can easily be lost as you prepare for things. And then you also have this incredible story on top of it of your life, your book. So I feel blessed, and I'm really blessed that you got to be here with us today. So thanks, Dito.
Oh, man, thanks for having me and for that amazing introduction. There's a lot of pressure now.
Right? So for those of you who want to tune in, I really wanted our interview to be a 3-part process to this. So part 1, Dito has an incredible story, in my opinion, an incredible story of how he grew up. Very unique, very different from many people. And then part 2, I would love to get into his book, which for those of you, you guys need to go pick up Debunked. So I feel bad because I'm only at chapter 14, so I'm 100 pages in, but I'm really enjoying it. And there's one or two parts I'm hoping to highlight with Dito here. But yeah, part 2 would be the book, and then part 3 is getting into some of this experience and knowledge that we can share with other authors or just any independent creators that want to start doing convention scenes and things of that nature. So without further ado, Dito, would you mind sharing with us some of your story and how you started life?
Okay. Well, my parents were simple folk. So my I was born in Puerto Rico. My parents, my dad was in the Navy. He was an eye doctor, and my mom was a school teacher. And so we lived in Puerto Rico for 4 years. And then Dad got an offer to work in Saudi Arabia, in Riyadh, training doctors at the eye hospital, the King Khalid Eye Hospital. And so we moved to Saudi, and we lived there for over a decade. So that's where I grew up. And school only went to 9th grade in Riyadh. So once we hit, everyone did, once you hit 9th grade, you either went to boarding school or left the country. And so my dad and my mom's dream was to sail around the world. So that was like the family goal at that point. And so there were always posters on my dad's wall, pictures of Bora Bora. And during the Gulf War, we got evacuated because we were in Riyadh, the capital. And so they were, when they were shooting Scuds down, we were there about 11 days, and they said, all right, we're out. And so we got evacuated to Spain, and then went back to the States, and happened to be there for the Miami Boat Show. Okay. And during the boat show, my parents saw a catamaran for the first time. And so that my mom looked at that and said, oh, I could do this. I could live on one of these, and I could cross oceans, because it's a very different experience on a catamaran, which has a boat with 2 hulls versus like a monohull, which has 1 hull, largely because a catamaran is a much stabler sailing platform, whereas a monohull tends to heel based on the wind conditions. And so it's a lot more of like a physical challenge, and, it's a little uncomfortable in a different way. Yep. So that became their dream after the Gulf War, when we went back to Saudi. So they bought a boat, and I spent my high school years living on the boat's name is Exit Only, because when you leave Saudi Arabia, every time you leave it and you're going to come back, you get an exit reentry visa. But when you leave for your final time, you get an exit only visa. So we got an exit only visa. And so that was the name of the boat. and we sailed from Florida to New Zealand. And then my sister was with us for that. She's an older sister, and she went to college in America. And I did 4 years of 3 years. Was it 10th, 11th? So 3 years of high school in 4 years. I wasn't in any rush.
I was like, well, it's not like you can really go to the park down the street and get away from school, so you might as well do it.
Yeah, well, I was really enjoying living on the sailboat. And so someone just asked, did I escape Saudi Arabia on a catamaran? That's the best origin story I've ever heard.
Yeah. So first, shout out to Angel. Hey, man, thanks for tuning in. And then, of course, yes, we have Brian, which Brian is a good friend, a fellow author from Ireland, who is now a best-selling author in 2 different categories. So congrats, Brian, on your awesome release.
Oh, wow. Well, that's pretty awesome. Well, I want to hear about Brian's 2 book bestsellers. I don't want to talk. I want to listen. Well, anyways, so boats in New Zealand, and
What's up, Brian?
So we went New Zealand, Fiji, back to New Zealand. We had a car wreck. It was a lot of hospital time, and so it was. We ended up in New Zealand for a couple of years, and I went to America. I went to college, and I studied music for 2 years, and then media comm, and that's what my degree's in, is media communications, which has proven really helpful when being an author, because it turns out being an indie author means you have to be good at everything.
Yeah. So Brian is echoing something very important here. Nope, it's all about you today. So,
all right.
Yeah. So media communications, that sounds almost similar to like a marketing degree, but more focused on media instead of like a pair of running shoes or whatnot. Are they very similar in concept, or kind of how do you see a differential there?
Well, there's different emphasis in the media program. The one at the school I went to was really great because it was really plugged into production. They had connections where it's the only college in America that sends students to the Olympics in whichever country they're in, because the guy he's in charge of the media program also is in charge of recruiting for. So every Olympics has what's called a host broadcaster. It's called the ISB, International Sports Broadcasting. And so because there's 200 different countries want to send their media teams, so they can't have all those cameras at every event. And so what they do is they have the host broadcaster. So they have cameramen from around the world who are professionals come in and work for ISB. And then the different countries have their announcers in different booths, but they all use the same feed. And so they brought, as college students, I actually worked as an A2, an audio assist in the Olympic Village for the Salt Lake Olympic Games.
Nice.
And so
now, granted, really there was a very disruptive event that happened at that Olympics, if I remember correctly.
At Salt Lake?
Or was that Denver when the bomb went off, or the bomb was found?
Well, that was Atlanta.
Was it Atlanta? Okay, because I remember they made a movie. I thought it was Salt Lake City, but okay, well, that's good. You weren't in any danger.
No. Well, it was so. I don't know. I'm getting so far off track here. But
it's all good.
In Salt Lake, we had our passes, and it was me and my friend from Moldova named Slava, and he looks very Eastern European, which he is, and I'm 6'4", and I look like I could be an athlete, and we both had the ISB uniforms on, which are like, they look like we're from a country. Mm-hmm. And so we had passes that let us get into the athletes' village. And so we would go in through, they had Secret Service and through the security and everything. And we'd hang out at the cafeteria with the athletes, or we would, at night, they had special concerts, like Coolio performed. And so we went and we watched Coolio with a bunch of Olympic athletes. It was a wild time. There was no danger though.
Yeah. Okay. See, these are the stories that we love to hear, the behind the scenes stories of your life. So,
well, okay. Well, that's, the Olympics were a good time. It was really fun. This is just a side note that you won't have known otherwise. Okay. In the cafeteria, at least at this one Olympics, they had a McDonald's, and at that McDonald's, you didn't have to pay any money. you would just go and you would just say what you wanted from the menu, and they would give it to you because it was connected to the athlete's cafeteria. And so every day people would go, and I'm like, these dudes are Olympic athletes. They shouldn't be eating McDonald's, you know? And anyways, it was very popular. So after college, wow, that was really derailed. But to answer your question, so the marketing emphasis is more like a business thing. I was more on the production side. So I did audio production, TV production, things like that.
Okay.
But I also had to study graphic design and writing for media, screenwriting, things that ultimately have proved valuable as an author.
Absolutely. So you were going to college, you're getting your degree, kind of where did that transition then? Because I know you also had a 2004 to 2006 voyage. So what were you kind of doing in that transition period?
So after college, I graduated in 2002. I was dating my wife, who's upstairs, and I moved to Florida after I got out of college, and I was like, what am I going to do? I don't know. I had a hilarious attempt at being a firefighter, which it was actually funny. My sister texted me a photo today of the rejection letter I got from the firefighters, the squad. It was. I'll give you the really short version. My uncle was a captain in the fire department, and so everyone knew him, and they were all like, well, let's see what Bob's nephew's gonna do. And I had gotten mixed up, and I didn't realize that the interview portion, I thought it was going to be a polygraph portion, which there's no excuse. But I did the physical test. I did the written test. I went in for what I thought was a polygraph, and it
oh my God.
No, she threw it away. She told me. That's pretty funny though. So I was living with my sister at the time, and I got up that morning, and I cannot explain why, but I put on, I was like, I should dress up. So I put on my Aloha shirt and my corduroy pants. And then I was walking from her living room to her kitchen, and I stepped on one of those, like a nail, like a carpet tack thing.
Yeah.
And it went right into my foot and like into my heel. So it was bleeding everywhere. So I was like, so I put on my socks and my flip-flops and I went. And so I showed up at the place, and I had my little white slip of paper, and all these people are sitting there on a bench, and they're all in business suits, and they're all holding white slips of paper. And I have my Aloha shirt, my brown corduroy pants, and my bloody socks with my flip-flops. And so I went, there was no time. I was it. There was nothing I could do. And I went in, and it was the fire chief and all like the high level people sitting around a table interviewing Bob's nephew. And it was bad. They said, so what are some of your strengths? And I was like, I'm really a creative person. That's something I love. And then I remember specifically this guy just looked at me. He's like, we don't encourage creativity in fighting fires. And it went as badly as an interview could have gone. And I got home, and the minute, this was still when there were landlines. They didn't have cell phones.
Yep.
I walked in the door to my sister's apartment, and the phone rang, and I picked it up, and it was my Uncle Bob. He was like, "You wore flip-flops?" And so, anyway, so I didn't become a firefighter, and out of shame, I moved to Florida. And in Florida, I worked. I worked for half a day as a landscaper for a guy who taught entrepreneurship. And then I got fired because I knew nothing about landscaping, which was fair.
So apparently you remind Brian of Mr. Incredible from The Incredibles.
Oh, man. Wow. That's going to save me a ton of money on audiobook narration. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I wish I could remember some quotes right now. I got fired from landscaping. Then I got a job cleaning mega yachts, like just scrubbing them.
Okay.
And I did that for a few months, and then I got a job working as a day worker on the president of NASCAR's mega yacht. I was like grinding rust off engine parts and painting things. Then I
Wow.
got fired from that, and then I worked at a music school and I taught music. And then I kind of got fired from that, but I got a second job. Anyways, all that being said, I was teaching music to like 20 students. That's been my bread and butter, teaching private lessons. And uh, the boat was in Australia by this point, and it had been bugging me. I'd sailed from Florida all the way to Australia, and I'd lived on exit only for 6-7 years at that time.
Mhm.
And I called Dad and I said, "Hey, let's finish the sailing trip. Can we do that?" And so he talked to my mom. They called me back and said, "Save 10 grand, don't sell your car, and we'll do it." Because they didn't want me to be like mooching off of them.
Sure.
And so it took me a year and a half and 3 jobs and eating a lot of cereal. And I did. And so then also my wife joined us. And so from 2004 to 2006, we sailed from Australia across through Indonesia, across the Indian Ocean, up the Red Sea, the Mediterranean, across the Atlantic, back to Florida eventually.
Okay.
So, yeah. And
How
then,
how do you
yeah.
not go stir crazy? Because I know there's a third expedition, and that's what really leads into, your book story. But
Yeah.
as I'm reading through and I'm seeing your expeditions and stuff, I'm like, I would probably lose it. What's it like to live on a boat for that extent of a time? Do you ever really get stir crazy and just kind of like, man, I wish I had a break from this?
I suspect you'd get a different answer from my wife. But I'm the kind of person that I don't really get bored. I just have so many projects I'm working on.
Okay.
So the thing I love about sailing and about the ocean is it really connects you with the present. You have to be aware of everything that's happening, even on a normal day, not just when you're crossing like the Atlantic or something, which was a 16-day crossing. But if you're anchored in goodness, I'll think anywhere. If you're anchored
Florida,
in
whatever.
Fiji,
Yeah.
yeah, it doesn't matter. You're constantly looking, hey, what's everyone else doing? Because if someone goes upwind of you and they anchor poorly, they can drag down on you. What are the weather conditions doing? The weather is everything on a boat. Because if it's raining, you're wet. And if it's a shallow bay and it's really windy, it creates fetch and it creates really choppy waves. And so everything is all about weather conditions and what's coming tonight, what's coming tomorrow. You're always monitoring that. And so, and every region has different things to be concerned about. When we were just in Panama for 8 months, and there's a great variety of weather in Panama, but you're dealing with so much lightning, like a crazy amount of lightning. They have what's called the chocosano,
Okay.
which means chicken butt, and it is like the most evil roll clouds you have ever seen. Just off the north coast of Colombia and where it meets the San Blas Islands, where Panama is, like vicious. And you have to like be thinking about this stuff. So that's one thing I love about sailing is it ties you into the moment, to the present, and you have to really think through everything you're doing. When you're sailing, you have consequences because there's thousands of pounds of force going around you, and you have to be thinking about where you're headed. What about shipping? What about and now when I have kids on board, we got to think about safety. And so I would say, to answer your question about being stir crazy, it's rare that I have the luxury of relaxing to the point of like feeling sorry for myself.
Sure.
I will say that it was funny when on the third voyage, which I haven't gotten to yet, but when we sailed from the Bahamas down to Panama, we had to cross the Caribbean Sea, and we were aiming for Cartagena, which is in Colombia.
Okay.
But the wind was coming from the east. It was reinforced that year. So we were getting 25 knots on the beam, which means like 90 degrees.
Okay.
And so that's great for like going fast, but it also means that you can imagine you've got that lateral, you're just getting that for like
Mhm.
8 days, something like
Oh
that.
my gosh.
And also downwind of us, it was Nicaragua and Honduras, and they're having a lot of piracy problems.
Mhm.
And so we had a choice. We could have pulled over to Jamaica, but if we hit Jamaica, then we would have had to point higher into the wind, and they weren't going to die anytime soon. So it would have just
Mhm.
been like, so it meant we had our best option was aim for Cartagena. We ended up falling off into Colon, Panama. But it was, I remember just getting beaten up. And we're all just looking at each other and we were just laughing and like, this is so miserable. What are we doing with our lives?
Yes.
It was one of these things like, if we could have gotten off, I think we all would have just been like, okay, okay. But it was like, we're committed and that's it. And
Yep.
just, suffer and you made it. And it's always, it's kind of, I think it's like having a baby, after my wife's first baby, I was like, we're never doing that again. And then she's like, I think I want a second kid. I'm like, well, I remember the first time. I mean, so I think it must be like that, where you just kind of like it all just, smooths over
Yeah.
and you just remember, oh yeah, that was a rough passage, huh? So
Yeah. Well, again, like at the moment, it's so miserable. And then later on, it's such a great memory of laughter because you
Yeah.
endured something. And that's where, from military, we always would just say, embrace the suck. Just embrace the suck. It's going to get worse before it gets worse.
Yeah.
So, and that makes total sense.
Yeah. So that was, yeah. So I wouldn't say stir crazy is more comes. When it's the roughest is if there's no wind at all.
And and you're just motoring. Like, yeah.
That can be a little bit like, if it's stultifying, if the heat is just oppressive and you're just like, oh no. That can be, and in those cases, what we'll do sometimes, if you're in the middle of an ocean, you just stop the boat and we'll jump in and just swim and, just do something to break the routine. And, that's one thing I do. I love is I can always get on the transom of the boat with a bucket and unlimited shower. As much you could do that for 6 hours if you want. Just keep dumping fresh water and it cools you off, and then you just do a quick freshwater rinse.
That's awesome. Okay, so there's a final voyage, which is life-shattering to many people around the world, life-changing to many people around the world, and for you, it seemed like you really had a moment that sparked a whole new venture in your life. So let's talk about the third voyage, and as we transition into this new book career and book that you have.
Sure. Okay. So as far as if you want to talk about the transition to writing, I'll tell you why I wrote a book.
Okay. Let's go. Yeah, let's go with that.
Okay. So I was in a band called Too Many Drummers, and I devoted like a lot of my life. I started that band in college, and then after college, I kept it going, and I devoted at least 10 years to like going for it. And I wrote the songs, and I had great friendships. I loved it. There was like a real brotherhood with lots of band members because it kept, the lineup kept changing. But we released an album, and I said, I want to create a stop motion music video. And so I started, and everyone in the band's like, oh, yeah, that's a really good idea. You should do that. Like, no, I can see this. This is gonna be great. And so I just started doing it in my garage, and my wife let me move the car to the garage, and I just filled it up, and I built a huge set that was say 10 feet by 10 feet, and I built a space junkyard, and I made robots that I could move, and it was a whole thing. I shot the scene from Back to the Future. Where he blows himself across the room with the amp.
Yep.
I did a shot for shot remake of that to start the video. And so I had this whole thing, and TJ, it took me 3.5 years.
Oh my gosh.
So it was,
that is some commitment.
I won't lie. There was a 6-month period in there when I stopped animating because I was just like, this is a terrible project. And then I realized I had to finish it. I went downstairs and I started again, and I didn't stop. And the thing about that project, what that taught me was there are things that I can see in my head that my friends and my family who love me so much and support me, they don't see them. And so it gave me the courage to say, I'll show you. And so I powered through and I finished the project. And then I said, I hate asking people for money, but I'm going to do a crowdfund to raise money to premiere it at a historic theater downtown. So I did a crowdfunding thing. We got in the newspaper, raised enough money, had a bunch of people came, and I brought some of my by that point, former bandmates, because when you take 3.5 years to animate a music video, a lot can change. So, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't recommend this as a promotional effort. Anyway. Yeah. But they came and we performed some songs that they barely remembered. And then we premiered the video, and it was one of the best nights of my life. Yeah. And it's like, it was fantastic. And I walked away going, I can do really hard things. And it made me believe in myself.
A guy who sailed across the ocean twice. Hey, I can do hard things. Like, yes, you can. You've already done it twice.
Well, yeah, I mean, by that point I had circumnavigated, but at the same time, you know, that's always been like my family thing. And it was kind of, for me, it's like I'm really comfortable in that. And so it's challenging in like a stamina way, but not in a like conceptual way.
Yep.
And so like, I know what it takes to cross an ocean. I know that world. But to do something where even my wife, who loves me dearly, is like, I do not understand why you are standing in the garage at 2 a.m. And, you know, I finished it.
Yeah.
And so it turned out great. And then I thought, well, what else would I like to do that like scares me? And I'm going to write a book. And so that is why I started writing a book, because I thought, well, what can I do that would be like creatively challenging and scary? Because I like writing. I like stories. My favorite authors, Terry Pratchett, Neil Gaiman.
Hey, Alan.
Who else? Well, I have lots of favorite authors, and I love reading. And the thought of like daring to wade into the water of these incredible storytellers was so intimidating. And also the thought of like, I'm going at the end of this have to have a book to hold up to people and be like, this is the best I could do.
Yep.
And so so that was why I started writing. But as far as the sailing piece of that, my dad had retired from being a flying doctor for the Indian Health Service in Phoenix.
Okay.
And so my wife and I were living in Kentucky, and we had 2 kids who were 6 and 9 at that time, 2 daughters. And we looked around and we realized if we didn't change anything, they're going to graduate high school. Like 10 years passes just like that.
Hey, thanks, brother. I know you stay up way too late, man, but dude, thanks for tuning in, Brian. Love you, dude. I'll talk to you later.
Cheers, Brian. And so we realized if we didn't change anything, we were going to be 10 years down the road and my kids would be graduating high school, and that was going to happen. And so I called Dad and said, let's do one more family adventure and let's sail from Florida to New Zealand. And so they thought about it. The boat had been out of the water for 12 years in Fort Pierce, Florida. And so he said, hey, if you come and refit the boat with me, we'll do it. So he and I went down to Florida. We spent 7 months refitting exit only. We so swapped the engines out for new ones, replaced the rigging. We sewed all new upholstery and installed it. And like all the critical systems, went through everything. And I learned a ton. It was great. Dad called it my internship. And it was really fun too. We work really well together, especially now as adults. It's been awesome. So we got the boat ready to go, and then it's kind of a long story, but we ended up leaving, and so we sailed from Florida down through the Bahamas for a while, then made it to Panama. We ended up spending 8 months in Panama, trying to time our trip to because you need to time everything to cross the Pacific so that you're in the Marquesas Islands after hurricane season is ended, and then or cyclone season, and you're out of Fiji by the time the cyclone season starts. So usually that's like mid-October. You need to be heading for New Zealand. And that's a lot of ground to cover in a short amount of time. And so we timed everything, and we sailed to the Galapagos, spent a few weeks there, I guess a couple weeks, and then COVID shut the Pacific. And so they were quarantined. They brought almost all the boats, all the cruisers, which it's hard to get into Galapagos nowadays as a cruiser. There's a lot of rules. But you have to clean your bottom like immaculately, and they send a diver and they check everything for any growth, and it's a challenge. But we did it, and a few other people did. Anyway, we were all quarantined in the harbor at Santa Cruz for 40 days. And I was the only one who got off the boat. And it was, at that time, COVID was an unknown. Everyone was really scared. And in Ecuador, which is Galapagos belongs to Ecuador, they were having people in like body bags on the streets. And I mean, they're like really just like awful situation. And so, I got off the boat to get groceries, but that was it. And they were checking your temperature. The military was there, and it was this whole thing. So we were running out of time because of oncoming hurricane season. And so we looked at our options were either sail for Marquesas or go up the Sea of Cortez. And because New Zealand wasn't accepting boats, Australia wasn't accepting boats, we wouldn't be able to get out of the cyclone area. And so we sailed north up through the doldrums of Sea of Cortez. That was a 23-day sail to La Paz. And so my kids, I don't think they got off the boat for like 70 days.
Oh my gosh.
It was, yeah, I know. And COVID was so crazy, and no one knew what to think. And, there's just different messaging, and it was just super intense. Right. And even on the sailboats, when we sailed up the Sea of Cortez for months, it was all, you had to make your choices of like, all right, are you going to go into the shore? If you do go into shore, are you going to anchor with other people? So anyways, it was a crazy
it's always interesting because like you bring such perspective, and this because, as a military guy, I've gone overseas. I've seen a few different cultures, but they're very much Middle East. So it was kind of that flavor. But it's the fact of when COVID hit, I'm in Oregon, I'm at home. So I was like, sweet. I get to work from home right now. I loved it. It was like the greatest. I had no concerns. I was not worried about anything. I never panicked about it all. So I was like, dude, this is awesome. I'll remote work for life. But again, like a totally different perspective. How would I have thought or perceived everything when I'm in a totally different country, a totally different culture, who are also dealing with this in a totally different way? So it's always interesting to have different perspectives of, you're the only person who's going off, getting family or food and provisions for their family and coming back. And, I'm not sure, did you speak the language? Was there a language barrier that you're also having to work around?
Yo hablo un poquito español.
Sí.
So, yeah. They speak Spanish in Galapagos. A lot of people speak English, like, because it's a tourist place.
Okay.
But I speak enough Spanish to like get in trouble, not out of it always. But,
yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that was, and I'm a big proponent of respecting the rules wherever you are, because I feel like I'm a guest when I'm in another country, and so I try and respect that. And at that time, certainly there were lots of rules that no one knew what was going on, and everyone was doing their best, and it was just that was really intense. So all that being said, I wrote this book Debunked. I wrote while we were sailing, so my kids would do boat school during the day, and I would put up a hammock and I would just get on my laptop and write, and no one had any idea what I was writing. But I was like, okay, I got this idea. And what's been awesome about writing is, like I said, with the stop motion, but that giant project, like my friends and family, even my wife, didn't see what I could see. It was so clear to me. But what I found with writing is that my wife is great to bounce ideas off of. So she knows everything about Terra Venom, and she knows the story. And so it's been really cool to be able to be creative in that way with her. So it's way more collaborative than any of the other creative stuff I've done before.
Yep.
So I'm in love with that. It's really cool.
Well, it sounds like you're really touching on a topic that I've discussed before, here or there with people, is having that partner that balances you in that loving way is so critical when you start to do these creative things, because you went from, this is my passion, I want to do this, to now it slowly becomes obsession, where I'm always thinking of my world, I'm always thinking of my story, I'm always thinking of this. And so a lot of times that partner, that support system, we're talking about the book, we're talking about the world almost every day. It seems to come up somehow, some way.
Well, just last night, I don't know, Sarah, she worked a 12-hour shift, and she's trying to go to sleep. And I was like, hey, I thought of this game. It's called Thug Wallop, and they're gonna play it. They're gonna get forced to play it like gladiators. And she's like, I'm going to sleep. I was like, yeah, but let me tell you the rules.
Let me tell you the rules. Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. So I can somewhat relate. And I know a lot of the other authors will absolutely relate to you on that. So that's awesome. Okay, so Debunked, I feel bad. I was telling Dito behind the scenes, I feel bad. I'm only 100 pages in. It is really good. It's a really fun story. So my question, Dito, is, so this is a steampunk. You have some steampunk technology feel going on. Those that love that world will get it because of some of the mechanics and how it all works. But what was your inspiration to go down this path? Out of all the stories, you could have done like a traditional fantasy. You could have done like some other type. So why was this your focus and inspiration behind it?
So it's not traditional steampunk, and I was worried about that because I thought that the community might be like really particular, like, hey, it's not powered by steam, sonny. And they're awesome. They're just like, come to us. You're one of us, because it's a story that includes a lot of inventions and technology and airships. So, like I've talked about sailing so much during this interview, I think of the Jack Sparrow quote from Pirates of the Caribbean, where he said,
"Stop blowing holes in my ship."
Yes. No, where he says, the Black Pearl is more than a rudder and tillers. What she is, what she means is freedom. And to me, like, airships are the ultimate expression of that. You can go anywhere in an airship. And so that when I knew I was going to take years to write a book, I thought, what are the most awesome things that I love? Yep. And it's adventure, it's exploring, because I love maps, and I'm fascinated that we live in a world where 500 years ago, there were dudes who said, hey, I know we're probably not going to survive this, but what do you think's over there? Like, that's crazy.
And let's just go draw it.
Yeah, let's just see what happens, Not a horse, let's go. Or we're going to get on this ship, and is this flat? I don't know. Let's go find out.
Is there an end? We'll find out.
It's so, and granted, life expectancy was a lot shorter, but the sheer courage and the sheer wonder of that equation is incredible. And I know a lot of those people maybe didn't have social mobility and the occupational options. And so if you were in the Queen's Navy, you're going to go wherever the captain said to go. But still, I love the idea. And by the way, when we sailed across the Pacific in 95, we were using British Admiralty charts to chart our way, charts that Captain Cook made. They're still using. And like, that's so mind-boggling. And so the thumbprint that explorers have on our lives in a way that we're not even aware of a lot of the time, I'm fascinated by. And so like the premise of Debunked is what happens when the world's worst explorer goes missing for the 6th time in 2 years. And so that in Congress with airships and mad scientists and warrior librarians and lizard warriors, I ripped off everything I love in the world and threw it in a book.
Yeah. So that's kind of a great segue of leading into some of the questions I had as I'm starting to dive into the book. So Ozzy and Alex, there are two main characters that, two main characters, I guess, that, we're kind of going and following along. So also, audience, I've had the privilege of meeting Dito's sister, Wendy, who is awesome. Like she's just, awesome as all get out. After meeting both of you, I feel like there's some similarities and influences in these characters. Is that true?
She would say so.
Nice.
Well, so the Forsyth twins are Sir Quidby Forsyth III, the aforementioned world's worst explorer, has gone missing, and his grandchildren, Alexandria and Ozymandias, get swept up into another world, Terra Venom, where they discover that maybe he isn't actually, he might be the world's greatest explorer. And Alex, so she goes by Alex and he goes by Ozzy. And as an author, I'll tell you one reason I did that. I wanted to have names that sounded like they came from explorer families. So Alexandria is the Library of Alexandria, and she's a sportsy kind of like outdoor, a little bit like an extreme adrenaline junkie. And so she goes by Alex, and she wears all black and Converses, and she doesn't take any prisoners, and she chafes under the thumb of authority. Whereas Ozymandias, who goes by Ozzy, the reason I chose Ozymandias is from the Shelley poem. Are you familiar with that one, Ozymandias? No. It's a really cool poem where it's about a kingdom that the poet goes to this place where there's a broken statue in ruins over a sand plain, and there's a plaque on the statue, and it says, I am Ozymandias, look upon my works, ye mighty, and despair. And so the idea was, at one time, this king, the mighty Ozymandias, was boasting of how great everything was, and his kingdom was laid to waste by time. And so I've always thought, I've loved that imagery. And so, but the reason as an author I chose Ozymandias was it allows me to imply emotion, because when the grandfather speaks to him, he calls him Ozymandias. When his sister speaks to him, she calls him Ozzy. And then in moments of where it's like tenderness or like, hey, we're past the barrier and we're really talking, she'll call him Oz. And so it gives me the ability to just like imply the emotion of a. Hang on, Alan said something about I had a half elf.
And honestly, that's what I thought too. I was like, "Oh, Ozzy
really?
Osbourne," because I knew you were in a band, and I was like, "This makes sense." So, I think that's the fun part is like we get to spend time talking about the book and the world that your readers may not get to know more about if they're at a convention and you have a short, limited amount of time. So,
yeah. I did consider the Ozzy Osbourne implications, and that's one reason I spelled it Ozzie.
Okay.
Because I knew it would, if I did it the other way, it was like it would hit people differently. So yeah, the Forsyths, they each get embroiled differently into Terra Venom in the way that involves prophecies and involves a lot of frustration for them because they don't want to be the the playthings of destiny.
So kind of going back to the original question, is there a little bit of you and your sister's relationship and their character development? Because I still feel like there was a little bit there.
You know, I would say in our nature, certainly as when I was younger, yes. Mm-hmm. Of the two of us, we both have our daredevilness. So a good example would be when we were kids. We went to Bangkok in Thailand, and we went to a snake farm where we were holding. They did the tourist thing. They put a python around our necks and took pictures. And in our house in Saudi, there was a picture of me holding that snake, and it was a constant source of dispute as to whether I was sweating in the picture in Thailand, which is really hot. Because if I was sweating, it implied that I was fearful in a way that Wendy wasn't. And so this is awesome. Just this last year, my sister went to Las Vegas for a conference, and she did a stunt flight. She in what's called an Extra 300, which is like a carbon fiber, really nice aerobatic aircraft. And it's a 2-seater. And the cool thing is you go up and they let you take the yoke and actually fly maneuvers, and they'll fly you through the canyon and do this whole thing. And she landed and she was like, "This was amazing. Dito needs to do this." And so I love airplanes, but I've never done anything like this. And so she's like, "We're going to do it, and I'm going to go with you. I'm going to do it again." And it's like it was her gift to me. She actually, she paid for it as a gift. So we drove up from Phoenix up to Vegas specifically for this. And I knew that if I got in that plane and if I threw up, I was never going to hear the end of it. And I tell you what, I have never been more focused in my life. Of just like, I had the little vomit bag in my hand and I'm just like sitting there, and I was like, I will die before I throw up, Did
you have ginger in your system before you took off?
Yes, I did. They had like a little pilot's lounge. And so I was in there, I was looking at all the food. I was like, I need something light, but I need something that, I was like trying to formulate it just so. And it was crazy, by the way. I couldn't believe it that they're like, "Okay, here's how you do a loop-de-loop." And he does a loop and he goes, "All right, your turn." I'm like, okay. And so we did a loop, and then we did we did flat spins. We did one of those like a tail hammerhead stall, and this one where we went up and then we flipped the airplane and we're inverted backward, like literally doing tumbling through the sky. And it was awesome. It was really awesome. And I didn't throw up, everyone. Okay. But so all that is to say, our competitive nature is alive and well, but I'm probably I have more fortitude than Ozzy does. But of the two of us, I do a lot of martial arts. She really doesn't like getting hit in the head.
That's right. I forgot about that. Yeah. I remember you told me that.
Yeah. Of the two of us, we have different strengths. Yeah.
Ellen doesn't believe you. I'm gonna throw up. Okay, so it because that's where as I'm reading it and I'm enjoying it, it definitely sounded like that. So and then also can I read a quote?
Yeah,
from the book?
Of course.
About not throwing up. Yeah, we knew it. Yep. Okay. All right, page. I thought for sure I highlighted it. Here we go. Yep, page 57. There must be a mistake, Alex said. Our grandfather wasn't a good explorer. He mostly wandered around until someone rescued him. As soon as I read that, I was just like, that is such a true statement of a family member. Like, wait, what? Grandpa? Yeah, no, Grandpa's not a good explorer. And I just realized that's Alex, so I should have probably tried to do a female voice, but yeah, no,
I was in. I was locked in. I believed you.
Yeah, so I loved that. I definitely laughed out loud, and I was like, "Yep, that's a family member quote right there." And then the other one I thought was really good, or it was one where as soon as I read it, I was like, I think I know exactly where he was at when he wrote this. But I have it set for page 78. Let's see here. Thanks. Is coffee popular in Terra Venom? Depends on the crowd. Scientists swim in it. But muscle-headed, stab first, think later types prefer drinks they can quaff. As you started to describe coffee, I'm like, I feel like you were on the ship, waking up, and your dad was making coffee, and he's like, yep, just give me some coffee right now. And I just felt like I could see you on the ship having this cup of coffee and then being like, this is a great scene to write about. And then you wrote a scene about coffee.
That's almost assuredly what happened. Yes.
So I'm definitely enjoying it. And then, you have your own creatures, your own races. You have the dromedarians, the Saurians.
Saurians.
So camel-like creatures, lizard-like creatures. And I was like, you know what? I feel like this is all inspired by your childhood of being in Saudi Arabia and growing up in the desert and seeing these different creatures every day.
When I was a kid in Riyadh, we had one TV channel, which was the public TV channel for Saudi, and I can wow. When I said that, their theme song melody just popped in my mind. I'm gonna sing it for you here, okay? Hopefully, you won't get sued, but it's probably like 35.
It's probably changed by now. Yeah.
He goes, dung 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 dung, and it was just like a little ding 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 ding. I've probably listened to like 400 hours of that song, waiting for like Bugs Bunny to come on.
Yeah.
But there was a show run by, I think she was a British lady. It was a kids show, and she had a sock puppet, and his name was Jamal the Camel. And
oh my
Jamal
gosh,
means camel. Do you know Jamal the Camel?
It sounds so familiar. Like, I'm sure I've seen clips of it because it sounds so familiar to me right now.
It must be on the internet. I mean, I've never looked it up, but
we definitely should now.
Yeah, from a young age though, I was like Jamal the Camel, and I think that's where dromedarians came from. I was just like, yeah, we got to have camels.
Oh my gosh. Okay, hold on here. Let's see if we can.
Are you looking up Jamals?
Yeah. So this looks like a modern version of Jamal the Camel.
Yeah, that would have been like cutting edge futuristic graphics from Aliens.
They definitely look like they've rebranded it for people. Nope, that's the battle. And you know what? Knowing the internet and my search history, that's as far as we'll go.
Well, you're playing a dangerous game.
All right. Like it didn't even dawn on me until I was like, you know what? The internet is not a good place.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even as an author, like half the time you're searching for how exactly does, a sword pierce the jugular or whatever? You're always researching crazy stuff.
Yeah. Well, so my second book in my second series, I just finished writing it. I'm going through it now. And Dito knows, like, my first two series are written for more of a mature audience. There's profanity, violence, sexual content, all of that stuff. And book 2 gets into some really heavy stuff. And Dito, have you heard about this movie, The Sound of Freedom, recently?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
So you know kind of what it's about, human trafficking and everything. So that's what book 2 of my second series is about, is human trafficking. And the main character's going after that organization, stopping them. I had no idea the movie was coming out when I started writing book 2. So that was where I've had to do some research on some stuff to where it's like, yep, this is not a good search history for people to see. But you also want it to be authentic, realistic, convey the message. So that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I'm really excited. Book one, Debunked, over 3,000 books sold this past year, which is a huge accomplishment. Congratulations to that. You also were a self-published science fiction competition semifinalist, which, for those of you who don't know, I want to say it's a yearly competition that you can be submitted into, where 300 books are considered and reviewed, and you made it all the way into a semifinalist category, honorable mention. So a huge congrats to you on that.
Thanks.
Oh yes, and absolutely, Alan as well, outstanding. So, I mean, and to put this into perspective for people who may not realize, the average book that is published, especially even by an indie person, the average book will never reach 300 sales. So the fact that Dito has accomplished 3,000 books sold is a huge testament to the quality of the writing, the quality of the story, but also the presentation. And I want to transition to part 3 of our interview, where we talk about conventions. For someone who doesn't know Dito, doesn't know the story, someone has written a great story when you see people come up to their booth and say, dude, you're here from last year, I want to buy another book. And it's like, but you just said you already have a book and you want to buy another one. And then you see that person later that day come back with a friend, dragging that person to Dito's booth and be like, this is the guy you need to. And this was every day of a 3-day convention, where constant people who have already read Dito's work or bought the book that day and are bringing more people back. Like, that is a huge testament. So a huge congratulations to you on that.
Thanks.
Absolutely. So let's actually, for indie authors, anyone in the indie space who is like never done a convention before, this is part 3 that we wanted to highlight what made Dito stand out so much from so many other people, especially when you're at Phoenix Fan Fusion, which used to be Phoenix Comic Con, a transition there. To show you guys, this was Dito's booth. And obviously you can see here from the little bit over here, here's my little setup, my little setup. But as soon as you walk in, you are drawn to this booth where you have a leather, I want to say it's a leather sign that drapes over the front. You have the huge map in the back, the map on the side, and then each and every book has been hand wrapped, hand stamped to gift to that person. But then let's go over to the Angelus. Let's see here. So right here, you have your aeronautical airship. And how many hours did it take you to design this thing?
Well, that's an interesting question. Angelus is...
Angelus, excuse me.
Oh, yeah. So it's like the words and then jealous. So when I started building Angelus, it was another one of those projects where I was like, I can see this. I know this is doable, and I'm just going to start. And it's one of those deals I couldn't ask for permission, but my wife at this point knows me well enough. She's like, she trusts me to go for it. And my dad actually helped me build her. I found the hull in like New Jersey on Facebook Marketplace. I was looking around for, yeah. Well, I was looking all around for a solid wood hull, because I knew part of the trick with anything you do for Comic-Cons, if you're going to do multiple events, it needs to be something that you can transport, and it's going to be strong. So I knew if I saw all kinds of amazing wooden historic ships that were like gorgeous, but you could crack them like an eggshell. And if you accidentally dropped them. And so I found this vessel, and as soon as I saw it, I knew it was the right one. So I got it shipped to me, and it didn't have any of this, of the pipes or anything on it. It had a sailing rig with a mainsail and a head sail. And so I took that all apart, and then I sanded the sides, and then I carved the planks into it. and I all that piping I bent with Leatherman, and I super glued them in, and you can see at the back there. So there, her namesake is. Oh yeah, there back there's a battery pack that is leading to the lights that are in the portholes, because I drilled those holes into it, and everything I was doing was about. It needed to look cool. It needed to look brand and story appropriate, but it also needed to be strong enough that if I had any sort of bumps and I get people come up and they poke it and touch it, and I knew it
Yep.
needed to be robust. And you can see the rigging system there. If you look on the gunnel of the starboard side, the gunnel's the railing. Sorry, the rail. Yeah, right there. That is how my dad and I did the rigging. It was actually funny because once we were at that point, we're discussing the rigging like with such seriousness, because we're both sailors, and we're like, well, I mean, where's the center of gravity here, and how's it going to be? So it was, it was really fun, and for the bow there, that's her namesake, that dragon you can see. That's Angelus. Yeah, and so I wired a micro LED inside there because in the second book that's story relevant, and that also that the bowsprit you see, that's actually really cool because right there you see that those are something else I found on Facebook Marketplace. Those are pieces from an erector set from the 1940s, and so
I'll take your entire stock.
That erector set, I really wanted to use those pieces, and so that's actually how the power source in this world is called dynami, and that's how they collect the dynami is through that probe from the bowsprit there. And Angelus is the dragon namesake of the vessel, and you can see her wings there, and that's something I'm getting more into book 2. I'm writing that now.
Yeah, so that was something too, is, so many fans were coming up like, when is book 2? When is book 2? So where are you at in that process in writing it?
Man, I tell you, I was nervous, TJ, about going to Comic-Cons because so since I saw you, I've done, I think, 4 or 5 Barnes & Noble signings in the Phoenix area. I did Denver Fan Expo, which is a really pretty big Comic-Con. And I did the, what's it called? The Payson Book Festival. Okay. So it's been a busy few weeks. And at all of those events, I had people coming up to me. Oh, I knew it. I knew it. Hey, Sam, what's happening, mate? That is Sam. He's from Pablo, a sailboat that we sailed. We met them in Panama and sailed up the Sea of Cortez with.
Nice.
And, he's an awesome guy. He was one of my first readers.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
So book 2, I'm 30,000 words into it, and
nice.
And I think this is going to be. When I did book 1, it was 134,000 words that I chopped down to 108. I don't think that's going to be the ratio this time. I think those are 30,000 much more solid, well thought out words. So I think that it's coming along better than book 1 did at 30,000 words.
I've seen your book before, Dito. That cover stuck with me. I can't buy another book right now because I'm saving for my cover, but it's on the wish list.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you, Alan. That's really cool, man. Well, I'll be here.
Right?
Well, and by the way, I should say that I'll talk about the cover in a minute, because we are going to, if we're talking about marketing, I'll hit that. But as far as book 2 goes, I'm 30,000 words in, and here's the clincher that has been fantastic. I've had people come up to me who, at every event that I've done, aside from the Barnes & Noble ones where people have no idea who I am, but at the cons where I came back again, and they all said, "Where's book 2?" And then I told them how it was coming, and they all said, "Take your time. We want you to do it right." And I really appreciate that because I'm going to do it the best I can, as fast as I can. But at the same time, I really do feel like a responsibility to,
Mm.
I really, TJ, for me, this is, I love the beauty of like giving people an escape, and the beauty of, like, for me, this is like a love letter. And that's why I pour so much into like packaging my books, into all the marketing and all that. Is it's really about, I'm trying to connect with people, and it's my way of loving them, and I think they can respond to that. They see that because they know I'm so invested in their experience.
Right.
And so with book 2, I want I really am excited about, like, well, you probably know this, and I've been surprised this. The nice thing about book 2 is, in book 1, everyone's like, "What's that? What's that? Oh, what's that?" And in book 2, they don't have to ask those questions as much,
Right.
and so it's good because they're not like, they're more dimensional. They have more agency, the characters, because they're less just like wandering around bumping into things. And
Well, you did a great thing too in book 1, where first time authors, new authors may do a massive information dump at the very beginning, and it just is overwhelming, where you didn't do that, and you are trickling in all of this information as we follow the characters along, to where it's like, well, this is this and this is this, and so it's very nice and gradual in its progression.
Oh, thank you. Oh man,
Yeah.
that's really a compliment. Thanks a lot. I know exactly what you're talking about with info dumps, and what's been interesting as an author, I don't know about you, but as a reader, when I'm reading something, a lot of the times, if I see like a huge chunk of, like, okay, we're gonna, like, Tolkien is honestly a repeat offender at, like, hey, we're going to discuss every tree that these guys pass on this adventure,
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, okay, I'm skimming. And so as an author, it's interesting because I find myself, like, I'm asking myself, would I skip this if I was a reader? And so I try and avoid that kind of info dumpy stuff, but it can be hard when I think in some ways, because it's set in a totally different world, like a portal fantasy, it can be a little more challenging than if I said it in Phoenix. We all understand the rules here. And
Well,
so,
it's interesting too, because so for all of our viewers, the great thing with Debunked is it's a family friendly book where there's no profanity, at least that I've found. There's no type of sexual romantic stuff to worry about. It's literally, if you have a 13-year-old son or daughter, you can give it to them to enjoy. You in your 30s can sit down, read it, and enjoy it. It's an all age appropriate book of adventure, depending on the parents and how young they would start their kids with the book. But as I was reading, because as you know, I know we all start to know more authors, and we try to help each other out. And so I try to read all the books before I bring on the authors to talk. So I sometimes try to skim as fast as I can, and like, okay, yep, I see what's going on. I open up Debunked, and I'm like, oh, I need to slow down here. This is a very, I just want to use the word heavy. It's heavy, and it's a big honker of a book where you can really get lost into this world, and there's a lot of depth to it. But there's times where I'm like, I don't know if I really know that word myself or not. So there's some where it's like, I can't just skim this. I really have to dive into it. But that's where the more you focus and dive in, the more fun the adventure has been. And so today I was sitting here, and normally I like to read out loud to myself as well, because it forces me to really get into the story. And so it's been a fun read, but it's also great for the fact that it's family friendly, all ages.
well, thanks for that. That was a big challenge. My daughter's read it. She's 12. And one of the ways I learned to love words was from reading, like reading the Timothy Zahn Thrawn trilogy. The what's it called? I can't remember now, but it'll come to me. but reading books and finding words that I didn't understand and looking them up. And so I kind of, in the ways, this is a throwback. It's kind of a classic adventure where, even from the cover, you can see it's like I wanted to replicate. I say that I wanted to write a book that would have lived on my nightstand when I was 13.
Yep.
But one of the challenges, and you and I arrived at different points on the threshold on this, was how bad do you make a bad guy?
Yeah.
Because you have to establish this guy you want to root against this fellow. But so in this book, the principal antagonist is Scar the Annihilator. And he's a Sauratian, and he's one of the Fury King's special, right-hand special forces, walking tank destruction Maximus guy. And I needed to establish that Scar the Annihilator was not someone that we were going to root for, but also I wanted my daughter to be able to read it. And so that was really tricky because, remember when you were a kid and you watched Star Wars for the first time? Darth Vader was terrifying.
Yep.
And as an adult, I see him differently. But you watch Indiana Jones in the Temple of Doom, and Kalimar, and he's pulling the hearts out.
Yeah.
And Molarum does that. And I'm actually a little bit, as a dad now, I'm looking at those scenes and going, well, when do I introduce my daughters to Temple of Doom? Because that kept me awake for nights. You know? And so
I remember I had nightmares from a video game start screen. It was one of the first Nintendo video games where you just click start, but they had these two beady eyes, and it frightened me for days. I get it.
Yeah. So if you are trying to write an all ages book, but actually have stakes that matter, the bad guys have to be bad. And so that was always an interesting line to toe. And to that end, there is one character, and I won't give anything away because you haven't made it that far, but there's one character that actually did not survive up to the 12th revision. And then I kept my beta readers were like, oh, but I liked him. I'm like, okay, fine, he survived. And so, all right, I left the door open to him surviving because I couldn't be that dark. I couldn't do it.
So that's where I have my two development editors, Q and Lucas, and we've done some, we do our video chats. We talk about where we're at with the book series going forward and stuff. And there's times where I was like, okay, and I would say stuff, and they would get so ticked at me. They're like, dude, I'm like, what? You guys have to know what happens in the future so that I can make sure. And they're like, we don't need to know everything, bro. I was like, oh, sorry. Just try to forget what I just told you then.
That's a tough balance to find. Yeah. It's because sometimes things happen, and I have had people complain about some things in book 1. And I'm like, well, there's a reason that happened, but I can't tell you yet because in book 2, that seed comes to fruition. Yep. And so it's always, at least I hope so. If that storyline gets killed, then I've, made a terrible mistake. So
right. So, okay. So I want to make sure we get all this stuff in for the part 3, and then we can go into some more questions and stuff because I love what we're talking about. But presentation and building your brand, and you really hit on it, I think, of where I wanted to do something to show love and appreciation to my readers by making this experience. So how much time have you dedicated just to making sure your presentation and your brand presence when they come to your table is the forefront?
So the reason you go to live events is because you're trying to connect with readers. And most readers, at least as an indie author, most readers aren't going to be familiar necessarily with your work. And so I don't feel like I'm in competition with other authors. I'm not competing with other booths. I mean, on a sheer numbers level, there's probably some degree of that. But when you're at a live event, your job is to connect with as many people as possible. And every event is different. So a Comic-Con is full of people that aren't necessarily there to look at books. But a book festival is full of people who are dialed in, and they come up to your booth and say, "What do you have?" And they want to know. And so the thing to keep in mind is people want to be excited, and they want to be overjoyed, and they want to be a part of something that's cool. And so my goal is, as I've discussed my background with adventure and traveling and sailing, and I hope you can see, the people who are watching, like, for me, this is such a natural extension of my experiences, but also my interests. And so it helps me because I'm not putting anything on. I'm just myself, when I'm selling and marketing and branding. So that is, for me, first and foremost, the most helpful thing, because I'm an authentic person. I try to be, and I just don't. I don't do well if I have to pretend to be someone I'm not. And so my advice would be, at least how I look at it, this is to indie authors out there who are wanting to do live events. You want to find something in your comfort zone that is a way for you to extend your brand and give people something to be excited about when they come to your booth. And so to that end, marketing your book starts with the number one step is your book cover. Mm-hmm. And this cover is the most important thing that I've done with my book. And so to that end, like you see this map behind me. This is the Terra Venom map. That's the world, and I illustrated that as well. I'm an illustrator and author, and so it took me a year to draw that. I did that while I was sailing and while I was writing. I did that in the Sea of Cortez, and it's all vector art. So it's on my computer, and it means it's line drawing, but I can zoom it in or out, and it won't pixelate. But it also means that there's probably 3 million lines in that map, and it took forever to draw. And my laptop starts smoking when I open the file. So
not again.
But yeah, it's like, okay, and it rolls up its sleeves. And so you can see in the cover. So what I did, even though I'm a graphic artist, and even though I'm very comfortable with that vocabulary and that idea, I hired a cover designer, because that's a different skill set. I needed someone with enough distance who would be able to say, okay, you wrote a book, but the job of this cover is to tell people who would love this book that this is a book they'll love. Mm-hmm. And so I hired a guy named Kirk DuPont, and he's a professional who's worked with lots of artists over the years, lots of authors. And Kirk said, well, what do you have in mind? And I gave him all the briefs. And, the typical thing, the prototypical way authors shoot themselves in the foot is they say, oh, there's this climactic scene in the book, and this is the one that's going to sell my book. So I wanted, and in my case, I gave him 3 ideas. And one of them was one of those scenes where there's an airship battle and this and that's happening. And, we're going to have Soratians. He's going to be fighting against the warrior librarians and all this. And Kirk was like, cool. And they disappeared for a couple of days, and he came back and he went with a totally different idea.
Well, so let's actually back up before you found Kirk, because you started with someone different, which was a couple-month process. And then it was, hey, we fizzled out and we had to go find Kirk.
Yes.
So how long, because you wrote how long did it take you to write? And then you had to go through this couple of months, 6 months of waiting for a graphic designer to say, hey, I'm not going to do the project now. And then you had to find Kirk. So this has been a love project for a very long time. And then how did you actually find Kirk, and what was it like when you first got that first rough draft?
Yeah, so the first guy I booked, I had found his site, and honestly, it was my mistake, because in retrospect, I look back at it. He's a great cover designer, but I look at his designs, and they're not right for my book. He just wasn't the right guy. His art style wasn't in line with who I am and what I do. But he said, hey, I'm booked contact me in 6 months. And at the time I was still doing revisions. So I said, fine. I contacted him 6 months. And then he said, okay, it'll be another 3 months. Okay. And so that time passed. And then as we're getting closed on there, I said, hey, well, how's it coming? Do you have any, do you want any ideas from me or what's going on? And then it was clear that he hadn't really spent any time on it. And he came up with some mock-ups. And unfortunately, they were just, it wasn't great. It wasn't right for what I needed. And honestly, it would have been one of those projects for him that he wouldn't have put on his website for sure. And it was a bad pairing. And so I was pretty frustrated because I'd wasted a lot of time. But we washed our hands of it, and he returned my deposit, or whatever. We got that sorted out. And so I was looking again for other artists, and a guy named Ben Wolf, who he's an indie author. I saw some of his covers and I liked them. And so, I've got, if you look at my bookmarks, I have a folder and it's got probably like 75 book cover designers that I've liked their stuff over, how it is, you collect just in case.
Yep.
And I saw, and I went and I looked at Kirk's site and I'm like, wow. And then on his website, he had a behind the scenes video. And so I clicked on it, and it was a time-lapse video of him working on a project where he took a picture of his sons and put them on the back of a pterodactyl. And then that was a magazine cover. But the music he chose was The Final Countdown by Europe, the Final Countdown. And I was like, this is a match made in heaven. Absolutely.
He's got my same vibes.
Yeah. I think, because I love that song. My band, we used to play that song, and we'd cover it, and it was just a fun thing to do.
Right.
And so I was like, we're on the same wavelength. I like his artwork. So I contacted him, and so it was a much shorter time period. I think it was he's busy. So I think it took a couple months, but by that point I was just like, thank you for squeezing me in, because really good book designers are hard to book because they're busy. Same with editors,
voice actors. Once you get into the industry, you just see hey, I've got 5 clients before you who are just as passionate about their book as you are. So it just takes time.
Yeah. And so Kirk came back, and this was his first concept. And it was funny because I had, so I'm the kind of person, I've learned that because I have opinions, I have strong opinions about creative things. I've learned I don't respond right away. I have to take at least one day and just sit with it. And so I remember literally I was just staring at the computer screen probably for 3 hours total, on and off, because I'd come back to it and look at it some more. And because it was in my head, I had this scene of the airships, and I was like, no, it's going to be amazing. And Kirk is like, okay, cool, but this will sell your book. And so what he ended up doing, and so I looked at it, and originally this was silver, all the metal work.
Oh, okay.
And there was no dynamic, there was no lightning on it. And so I said, well, can we change the color of the metal, and can we add this lightning? Because I wanted it to have that visual pop. And also in the story, there's one of the inciting events, the inciting event in the story involves a book, a leather-bound book with metal work on it, where there's dynamic involved. And so I wanted it all to tie together. And so Kirk took my artwork, from my map, and because I did it in vector art, he could take individual pieces of it, like Angelus over here. This is, so if you can see on the map behind me, over here, that's Drognab, Devourer of Worlds. And that monster up there is Steve. And so he took and he put Steve on the cover up there, and we've got Angelus. And then on the map itself, he highlighted the region that this book takes place in, which is, you can see it's got Aeronoth and the city of Contrivance, and so the different things in the book. And so the idea is, and here's the brilliant part, that like Kirk could, he set me up for a series. So now my next book, we can have the dynamic, we can have the metalwork, we can have a different section of the map, and we can just change the color of the the red to, I don't know what it's going to be, green maybe. I'm not sure yet, depending on the title of the book. And so he built it in with his professional mindset of like, this tells people fantasy, adventure, and whimsy, and it's interesting, and it's actually won some awards too, which is awesome. Like the SPSFC, it won the cover competition for that, which was wonderful. And like Alan said, I've seen your book before, and the cover stuck with him. And like, so to other authors, I see people all the time who are saying, I can't afford to pay a cover designer. And I would argue that really you can't afford not to if you want to. You're working so hard on your story. Don't shoot yourself in the foot. But like I said, remember, I had a professional who wasn't the right artist for me first.
Yep.
And then I found Kirk, and he was fantastic and was exactly what my book needed. And he, by the way, I should say, the other thing, Kirk, before he said yes, he said, well, he kind of said yes, but he said, let me read your book. And he won my heart when he asked to do that, because then I knew he wasn't, the first artist didn't want to read my book. He had no interest.
Right.
And so Kirk, by reading it, he knew it, he got it. And he does that, I think, with all his clients. So don't sell yourself short. If you're going to write a book, your most important marketing tool you have is your book cover, because it tells people, here's who this book is for. And so you need to hire a professional who's going, and I'm even, like you can see, I'm comfortable with graphic art, but my mindset and my skill set is not in that area.
Yeah.
And so, and by the way, you need a book that looks great big, and you need a book that looks great in thumbnail size, because it's going to be on Amazon, and it needs to be distinctive. It's going to be on all different stores, whatever you sell it on.
Right.
And so your cover is your starting point. If you don't have that, you're going to fight an uphill battle that I don't envy you. And so, and even, by the way, if you have a book that's not selling great and you're frustrated by the sales, it might be worth considering refreshing your cover and doing another take on it, because I see people do that all the time.
I think that's such a huge thing too, that authors get into their head where, this is the cover I want, or I can't afford it, or that if you're an indie, you can change your cover at any point. You don't have to stay with it. And that's where, I've got my 2 books published now. And it's exactly what I want and what I love. But it's the same thing, too, of, granted, I have an illustrator, artist, graphic designer. They all have a piece of this, and they all helped me create the vision. However, though this is the cover I love and what I think represents it, doesn't mean it's the cover that's going to be with it in 2 years or 5 years or 10 years. How many different covers have we had of Lord of the Rings? Mm-hmm. How many different covers have we seen of Chronicles of Narnia? So I know of indie authors who literally, there's one indie author, he will do a book launch. Of course, you have your avid readers who start taking it and start running with it. And then he has a certain point where he will flip the cover. And he mostly does it on Kindle, because it continues to generate interest of like, oh, wait, did I see that already? What is that? And so he just said he's seen a lot of success with that, where just for the Kindle Unlimited. So don't get so emotionally attached that you don't, you put yourself into a hole where, hey, this is a fantasy series. Some people may not see it as a fantasy series. This cover completely captures what that is. So be open to reflection. And I think, we're also hitting on another point that has come up before, where when you're an indie author, this is your business, and therefore you have to make business decisions. And hey, this person I hired, they're not working out, but I don't want to say no, and I don't want to take their business away, and I don't want to. sorry, it's not working out. Bye. And you have to take your personal emotions away from that business decision as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really hard one. But you learn the lesson the easy way or the hard way. I think that's an inevitability. And some people, it just takes time.
Yep.
Right on,
So
Alan.
Alan also has a channel as well. So he and I have shared some time together, and yeah, definitely, dude. This guy is awesome. So
Sweet. Thanks, man. Have a good
thanks,
night.
Alan.
So we talked about the book cover, and just as promotion goes, and the idea that you want people to feel at live events like they're going to see something exciting and something that is cool. And that, by the way, in my opinion, is why when you're running a table at a live event, it's feast or famine. A lot of times, I'll be standing there 20 minutes and not talk to anyone. Or I'll try and engage them, but I won't have anyone like really interested. And then you get someone comes, and then someone else comes, and then all of a sudden people who are walking by go, oh, there's people there. That table must be worth checking out. What are they looking at? And so
you have this awesome display which catches attention, and then you have those people in front where, oh, I don't want to miss out either. What is this?
Yeah. Right. And so it can get overwhelming too, but it's feast or famine. And so my best advice, let me tell you the other things I do. And like TJ touched on, so I package all my books. Let's see. Yeah. By the Terravenom Postal Service. And so what the world I've created is called Terravenom, which means poison land. And over here, it's got an airmail with an airship stamp, and it says property of St. Jude's Debunking Society. Here's a stamp that says inspected by ballistics with Dr. Villiab. He's one of the villains. And then this is the Merchant Guild stamp, and it says 1.5 clunklings, because the clunk is the currency in Terravenom. And then I've got this seal here. This seal is the symbol of the ancients. It's called the Stella Signum, the star sign. And so all of these are, they invite people into the world, and from the get-go. And in addition to that, I also include a small 12 by 12 relic map, which is of Terravenom. And so the reason I do all that, it's very time consuming.
Yeah, the reason I do it, your photos on Facebook where, hey, guess what? For the next hour, 2 hours, I'm outside painting maps, staining maps, and then letting them dry in the sun so that my readers get this physical portion on top of the book that is special, because you can't get that quality anywhere else.
That's right. And it's inviting people into your world. And you don't have to, I'm speaking to indie authors here, you don't have to do what I do. In fact, it's likely not appropriate for whatever your brand is and whatever your story is. But what I would encourage you to do is think of ways that you can invite people into your world and show them that you care about them. So the time I take to putting that together and the money, it's costs, honestly, it adds about $1 in cost to every book I sell. Because the map is 58 cents, plus I've got the cost of, just the materials. And so it's not counting my time.
Right.
But that is my love letter to my readers. And it's a way of letting people know that I care enough about you and your experience, and you can take a chance on me. And so that has been, and so to that end, that has been a fantastic way of engaging with people, but it does take a lot of time and a lot of persistence and effort. And I'm dyeing maps all the time. On my driveway, I have a baby pool I fill with coffee. So I relic everything, and I burn the large maps. And and I'll show you, TJ, you haven't seen all of this. Well, you've seen some of it, but here's another thing I do. And this is, so I only have one book out, but what I'm trying to do is create opportunities for people who would like to experience Terra Venom and or support what I'm doing and are excited about the world I've created. I'm trying to get opportunities for them to be further engaged. So one thing I do is I have what I call the Dynami edition.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a hardback book. And so I'm trying to find my camera there. Okay, there it is. I take this book and I clamp it, and then I paint it. I spray the edges so it's a nice gold color. And then you see this Dynami here on the dust jacket. I extend that by hand. I take Posca paint pens. It takes me 4 hours per book.
Oh,
and so I've got that, and then I do custom packaging for the Dynami editions. So you can see.
So are you just staining that one in a black ink?
This right here?
How do you get the black paper? Are you painting it or staining it in ink?
No, it's literally black paper.
Okay, gotcha.
I use a different paper, but it's of a similar
quality,
I guess,
texture,
quality.
Yep.
But I package it the same way, but without the stamps, and I do the Dynami on it. And so altogether, that takes me 4 hours, which is, a significant time. But I charge $100 for these, but it's a collectible version. It's a chance. Some people, I usually sell one per con.
I was gonna say you had I think it was only one copy, a special one that you sold to someone, and it was one that you kept in your treasure chest one. Was that version or a different version?
Yeah, that was a Dynami edition. So okay. I usually paint them so I have two on hand. So if I sell one, I've got one more to replace it. And this is another thing here. This map, I don't know if you can tell, but it's actually you haven't seen this, TJ. This is it's called Mega Map. It's a 4 foot by 4 foot map. And my next event is I'm doing the Game On Expo in Phoenix, and it's a gaming convention. And last year I sold a lot of maps to DMs, and so I wanted to offer them a large scale map, just to say, hey, this might be something you're interested in, and it might be like a blessing to them and how they want to if they do campaigns on it or whatever. But I also have 24 inch by 24 inches, my typical large map. This is Mega Map. That's all. And I sold a Mega Map at Payson Book Festival a couple weeks ago. And so what I'm trying to do is find new ways to engage people. And so, for example, this is Dr. Villiab.
Yep. I remember you had two of them at the con that we were at.
Yes, I have. No, this is the one you saw, and I have the other one in the bin there, and he's painted like R2D2, so he's R2Dito is the cosplay, but he's one of the villains in the story. And so I found a guy, actually the guy who printed the engines for Angelus, the 3D printed engines. I had him 3D print from one of my drawings, and so we came up with this guy. The problem with this guy is that he's got so many parts that it cost me it was 10 hours to paint him. Right. So it ends up being like $150 just for me to make to break even and make just a little bit of profit, depending on how you count your time, Right. So I'm quite happy for Dr. Villiab to just hang out at my table though. And here's my latest thing is this. Oh, nice. So this is Drog. He is one of the characters in the book. He's a side character, but in the city of Contrivance, which is where Dr. Villiab is one of the baddies, Drog is an experiment run amok. And so he's a clockwork dog who runs through the city sabotaging experiments. And so the scientists are always trying to capture him. And there's a wanted poster. And so I didn't pull it out, but I drew up the wanted poster for him. And so one of the things I'm experimenting with now is 3D printing. So I modeled this guy in Nomad Sculpt on an iPad, and then I had a friend who 3D printed him. And so based on how that went, I actually ordered a printer, and so that should be coming soon, I hope.
Nice.
And what my hope is that when I sell a book, I'll be able to say, hey, would you like to add a drog? And normally they're $20, but they're 15 with a book or
Right.
whatever. Well, I haven't figured out the price point yet because I don't know how this is going to work out. But the idea is this guy would be amazing on a bookshelf,
Mhm.
and he would be a fun way for people to be a part of Terra Venom and to like. So that's my encouragement to people is to other artists and authors. I know not everyone has the same skill sets, but people who are creative, and if you're creative, I mean, I don't know if you're comfortable with drawing things or if you're comfortable with
Mhm.
modeling things or whatever, but if you're not, you probably have friends who are, and it may be a way for you to further engage people, and also just purely from a numbers game. If you have more things that you can sell and you can make the numbers work, it can make it a lot more viable to do live events
Right.
because it's, usually for a booth, you're talking at an event like Fan Fusion, what was it, around 350, 400 ish? I can't remember what it was this
Oh,
year.
for the table cost?
Yeah.
I want to say it was 500.
Was it 500? Okay. Yeah. So
Yeah.
usually it's between 400 to 500, depending on the size of the event. I've paid as much as at Tucson Festival of Books, I paid 815, I think it was,
Right.
which was the most I've ever paid for an event. But it was also the most books I've ever sold at an event. And so, it just depends what your audience is. And uh, this can work.
Mhm.
But if you just show up, and I see this a lot, if you just show up and you put your books in a little stack on a table and you sit down and you look at your phone, you're going to have a lot harder time selling
Right.
books, and you're not going to have fun. You're probably going to have trouble getting readers, and you're probably not going to come back to that event again because you'll be like, well, that didn't work.
Yeah.
So,
You've
but that's
hit on such a great transition. And
yeah,
yet there's also so much great truth there for people to really, I think, question, because I think people really need to make a determining factor. Like, it's great to do conventions and it's so great to engage with readers, but I think you hit up where, how far into this convention scene are you really going to dedicate? That should be a big deciding factor. Because if you're going into the mindset of, I'm going to this convention and I'm going to sell all of my books, so I'm going to order like 200 of them, maybe a little high bar of expectations you put for yourself. You might want to lower it. But if you're planning to really invest and do multiple conventions and build, then you need to think of this branding experience. And you really have done such a great job of, basically everything on the table has a price tag to a certain point, or an additional type of experience point that you can add into the book. And so I think that's one of the things too, where I was talking to another author and he's like, well, I'm thinking about getting water bottles, and you can have a water bottle with your book. And I was like, well, as we know, hey, one, if it's a cosplay convention or people are in cosplay, they probably don't want to carry a water bottle with them. They, what message may you be conveying with, here's a water bottle for a book? And I said, and think of it also, the size. How much do I have to carry into the convention and set up? How much do I have to carry out? Where I said, dude, what if you just ordered like koozies of your book product and everything else? Because guess what? Hey, I don't drink water. I drink beer. Okay, well, guess what? You need a koozie for your beer. Do you need a koozie for your soda, for your sparkling water? And guess what? If you haven't read my book, every time you use my koozie, you're going to be thinking of my book, or something else. So that's kind of the thought process some people may need to focus on. And if, you're having the steampunk connection, so you have your robots, your steampunk clockwork dog. These are all things of that community that can love, and it's all tied to adventure. If your thing is horror, what things, what items go with that can enhance the experience? If you're a fantasy, those are those questions that you really need to think outside of the box. And then it comes down to, let's go with pitch. the pitch of your book. Would you please give us your 30-second elevator speech and then go into how you came up with this and how important it's been for engaging your readers?
Okay. So as TJ probably heard me say 10,000 times at Fan
I was
Fusion.
able to give like the first half of it. I was so well versed.
Well, I have a tagline and a pitch for Debunked. My tagline is Indiana Jones meets Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And so right away, with a certain demographic, that tells people, okay, it's adventure and it's going to be humorous. And so most of the time at the cons and the events I've gone to, people have had that reference point. Occasionally you get people who have not heard of either of them, but what can you do? I recommend to any author, if you can encapsulate your story, like I heard TJ doing, you did Full Metal Jacket meets, what was it?
The Witcher meets Full Metal Jacket, and they have a Dungeons and Dragons baby.
Yeah. So in one sentence, because the thing is, especially at cons, which is a different audience, because remember, these are people that are coming to see probably like their favorite actors or their favorite voiceover artists, or to check out, whatever kind of events and live things. And they're wandering through the exhibit hall, but they mostly want to see cool stuff. And they're not necessarily there for books. So if you have the opportunity, you see them, I always watch people's eyes. And if they're looking, I give them the context. I just say, Indiana Jones meets Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And right away, that sometimes they just smile and they move on. Other times they look at me like I'm, like, okay. And then other times they come over. And, the number of times that a connection, let alone a sale, but a connection with someone happens because I've said that, it's just so worth it. It's so worth it, because at the end of the day, it's great to pay for your booth. It's great. This is just my philosophy. I want to pay for my booth. I'd love to make a profit. I really want to get my adventure in the world. I want to, because to me, this is, it's like how I'm loving people. And, but at the end of the day, if you can connect with people and you can make their day better, and if you can add value to their life, even if they don't buy your book, that was a worthwhile encounter. And so the half of the battle at any live event is getting people to come over and talk to you. And I know for some people that's a nightmare. And for that, I don't, unfortunately, it would be disingenuous of me to brush that off. Or to pretend that I have insight into that, because I'm very comfortable with that. And I love engaging people in that way. It fuels me and it doesn't drain me. Like some people it does. So I do want to respect that. And I can only encourage to say that it's worth it. And also to say that a lot of times indie authors discount the fact that we're authors and the fact that we've created something because we're in this community and we're around other authors, and we're like, yeah, well, he's written 8 books. I've only written 1 book. Who am I? And he's sold 50,000 copies of that book. I've sold 3,000 copies of mine. Who am I? I mean, but to readers, to people who love stories, you are a spellcaster. You're a sorcerer. You're someone who has done something that they're grateful for, and they're hoping that your story will transport them somewhere great. And so don't sell yourself short. Even if you're not comfortable talking with people, I hope you find courage knowing that you've accomplished something of value just by writing a story, just by having it and giving it to the world. Mm-hmm. And people are cheering you on. They're rooting for you. When you're talking to them, they want to be like transported. And so that's my philosophy, and that's my encouragement to people who are even uncomfortable is, I know it may be uncomfortable, but know that you're a word weaver, and that is you're a magician. And mm-hmm. people are really excited to connect with people like that. So that's my tagline. And then my pitch. So I have an easel with my map on it. And so actually yesterday I did a Barnes & Noble signing, and I had a kid. I told him, well, I used to say, can I give you my 30-second elevator pitch? And I told this kid, I said, I bet I can do it in 22 seconds. And so we got out a timer and we timed me. So turns out it's an 18-second sales pitch now. Okay. And I was talking a little faster than usual when we timed it, but here it is. So the world's worst explorer has gone missing for the 6th time in 2 years. And this time, when he doesn't reappear in some random place on the planet, they have a funeral, assassins attack, and his grandchildren, Alexandria and Ozymandias, get swept up in a huge adventure and taken to another world where they discover their grandfather may be the greatest explorer in history. And that's it. And so,
and you've encapsulated the whole story in that moment.
Yes, but I've also done it in a way that I leave people with a question, making them want to know, well, wait, he's the greatest explorer in history? So what does that mean? I thought he was the worst. So when he was disappearing, maybe he was going somewhere else? Oh. And so what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to give the flavor of the story and also to set a hook to say, this is a story that you will want to read to solve and to understand what's happening here. And so what I did to develop that pitch was it developed over time. And, you know, I've done it a lot now in the past, I guess, year, July. So 14 months, the book's been out. And it's no exaggeration to say I've done that thousands of times now.
Well, I mean, you've done at least 19 conventions in the last year. So, I mean, even if you've talked to, you know, 100 people each day, 3-day convention, 300 times 20, you know, over 6,000 times you have been giving this pitch, and it's way more than that. But yeah. I mean, this is something as an author you have to refine, and you have to keep working on, and you have to just be comfortable with, like, yep, this is it. This is it. And you've, like you said, it's taken you 14 months to get to this point where you're like, I know exactly the message that is presented that leaves that question there of hanging, like, okay, and now I'm curious.
And it's also, by the way, it was a refinement process, and I'm open to refining it more. I mean, like my pride is not at stake here. My heart's not tied to it.
Right.
But, and when book 2 comes out, I will have a pitch for that as well. That'll be for people that ask, well, what's book 2 about? Or people who, you know, who bought book 1, hopefully. And so I remember, because I was working with, like, a good example would be the refinement process. I was working with the wording. When I said, and so World's Worst Explorers got missing for the 6th time in 70 years. They have a funeral, assassins attack, and his grandchildren, Alexander, like that. When I say assassins attack, and I used to say, when unexpectedly, out of nowhere, assassins attack. And what I found is I'm always watching people to see if they're connecting and to see if this is, you know, if they're interested, if they're laughing, if they're, you know, just how they're responding. And what I found was people were kind of drifting with my extra words. So I cut it down and I just tried to make it as brief as possible. And I know it sounds like I'm nitpicking, and I am, but when you're standing at a Comic-Con, what else do you have to do but to work on your sales pitch? Right. And so that's my advice to people is you want a tagline and you want a sales pitch that you can do cold. And so at this point, I've reached a point where I'm really trying to connect with people when I'm talking to them, but also if there's someone else standing on the side who's interested, I may, even in the middle of the pitch. So Ozzy and Alex get swept up in this huge adventure and taken to another world where they discover the grandfather, maybe, and I can hand a book to someone else while I'm talking and still giving the pitch, because I want to give people the full attention. I want them to feel valued, because they are. But also sometimes people, you know, you engage them and say, hand them a book so they have the opportunity to check it out too.
Well, now you've kind of like magnetized them. You've attached them, like, hey, I'm going to give you something real quick to check out. So now you can't leave until you give it back to me.
And that is definitely, there are lots of sales tactics. I don't go for the hard sell.
Right.
And this is just my philosophy. It's what I'm comfortable with. I know there's some people that are like, always be selling and always be like, they're really aggressive about it. And what I try and do and what I'm comfortable with is I present a knockout presentation. And if it's not for them, that's okay. It's totally okay. But I've done my best to connect with them and make them feel valued and important and improve their day. And they've improved mine just by hanging out. But one way you can do it, that connect with people, is if you hand them a book. As soon as you hand someone a book, then they're probably going to flip. If the cover's good, they'll flip it over and read the back, or they'll flip it in and they'll start, looking through. Even if you hand it to them, even if the cover's not good, they'll probably do that. But that I know that is a sales technique. And the only time I resort to that is if I'm talking to someone else.
Right.
And I just want them to feel like, hey, I know you're here and you have value to me. And so here's a book, just I'm acknowledging their presence and giving them an opportunity to engage with it. I could be wrong. I'm not a sales expert. But that's just what feels right to me.
That's the thing, though, is like for me as an outsider, my first con ever doing it, I'm standing there. All of these things have been worked on, tried and true, because it's bringing people to you. And you and I, you even had sales of just people wanting to buy your map. I had two small maps, and I had one guy who was just like, I'm taking this map. And I'm like, well, it's not really for sale. He's like, I'm buying your book. I'm taking this map. I'm like, okay. Have it, dude. Thank you for this sale. So,
yeah.
You had sales where, you have people who may just want stickers. They think your sticker's cool. Hey, can I have a sticker? You know what? Sure. Here's a sticker, which from your advice, go to a company like stickermule.com, sign up for their newsletter. And, when they have promotional sales going on, go ahead and sign up and get it, because you're going to get stickers for half off the normal retail price. So
Sticky Brand is a good one too. They have sales like constantly.
So, hey, I'm just going to buy stickers, in January. I know my convention's in November or October, but I have an extra $20. I'm going to buy twice the amount from retail price, and I'll just have those stacked up over time. So there's little things like that. And so we covered the pitch. I think one thing you and I, almost every day, we had this reminder conversation with ourselves of don't judge a book by its cover. And when we say that, we're not referencing our own physical books. We're referencing people at a convention that we initially thought, this is not a potential customer. This is not a potential reader. And then they miraculously, or they surprisingly bought our books. And it's like, holy cow, I should not have judged this person, this reader, off of their appearance. Have you anything to share as far as those thoughts to indie authors coming into this?
I think you hit it on the head. You don't know by looking at people what their life story is. You don't know what's going on. I mean, I'm speaking from just like a human level. You can't tell and what someone's going through. But in the same token, from a practical selling books level, you don't know if someone's shopping for a birthday present for their grandson. You don't know if that dude has had just a really bad day and he needs an escape. He's looking for an escape book that will make him laugh. I've sold books to so many people that I didn't expect, and I've not sold books to people that I was like, this is my ideal reader.
Yeah.
And like I connected with them, and we had this incredible like conversation, and wow, I mean, we're gonna go vacationing together. We're gonna,
kids' birthdays, everything.
Yeah. And they're like, okay, thanks. And they leave. And you don't know. And I mean, it's a general life rule, be kind to people, be generous if you can. And that's fine. But from a sales perspective, my philosophy is add value to people. And, people are people. And we draw a lot of lines nowadays. It's really, political lines, ideological lines, religious lines. People are constantly drawing lines and saying, this is where I stand and that's where you stand. And these are the differences between us. And one of the things I love about live events, but particularly Comic-Cons, is they're an environment that is welcoming. And there's such a positive energy and a positive attitude about like, hey, do you love Barbie and Stormtroopers? Well, you can cosplay as a Barbie Stormtrooper, you know? And there's everything from, you know, every corner of fandom is greeted with a smile and you know, a thumbs up. And beyond that, life choices about who we are and who what they're taking their identity in. People have, you know, it's a place where people come to be accepted. And I'm glad to be a part of that.
Right.
And I think when you're selling books, what you're doing is you're putting your voice into the world. And I hope that your author voice is one that is uplifting and that is bringing, adding value to other people's lives. And so when it comes to your customers or your readers, I try to think of them as people, and whether they buy my book or not, I hope I treat them the same way, and I make them feel as valued and important no matter what. And sometimes, you know, sometimes it's hard because when you're just from a practical standpoint, when you're selling books, your time, sometimes you'll be talking to a guy who is dressed as a fringe Futurama character, and you know, and he's a lonely dude. I'm making this up, by the way. The guy I'm thinking of was not dressed as Futurama, but I don't. In case he's watching this, he's not gonna get it. But the guy I'm thinking of, I went to a big con last year, and he was dressed as, and he was just lonely. He just wanted, and so he talked to me for like 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And that's a long time when you're trying to like run a business. And so at a certain point, just from a practical standpoint, at a certain point, sometimes you have to be like, hey, it's been great talking to you, but I really need to, you know, try and connect with these people. And also when someone's talking to you like that, sometimes other people will just walk past without stopping because they think you're busy. And so there are downsides to long conversations, but if they're adding value to people, they're worth it.
Yep.
So
absolutely.
I think that's my philosophy.
Yeah. Cause you know, I had a sale, a client or a customer, a reader dressed as like this giant purple teddy bear. And same thing. I'm like, this person's not going to buy my book. But I gave the tagline. Oh, interesting. Well, you know, okay, well, here's this. Oh, I really like that. Oh, I really like that. And then it was, you know what? Let me walk around some more and I may come back if I have, which again is like this 50-50 where you're hoping, but at the same time, you don't believe it. Like you're not coming back. And I think it was like, I had no sales for like 4 hours, and that can be really discouraging, right? And then all of a sudden, here comes this purple teddy bear coming right back, right up to the table, like, okay, I need this book. I was like,
oh, that's awesome.
Sold the book, and I was doing an email sign-up sheet, right? Like, hey, well, I'll be doing a giveaway, and they were one of the people that got a free signed copy of book 2. So emailed, oh, hey, you know what? I really enjoyed book 1. Yeah, I can't wait to get book 2. So I was like, sweet, some validation. And is that, like we talked about, never judge a book by your cover. You don't know who your future readers could be. And, you know, right there, like, I really enjoyed book 1. Can't wait for book 2. I'm so happy I won this drawing. So, yeah, it's a great time.
Dude, oh, I'm so glad that worked out with you on that drawing. That's really cool.
Yeah. It, you know, I was doing 10 signed copies of the book. I was doing 2 posters, and I was doing the grand prize was getting to make a character in one of the future books. You know, send a questionnaire out. You fill out the questions. What character name do you want? What powers? Whatever. I'll add it into the book. And I know one of the people, because of course, like price points. You know, doing a poster, a print is like $30, depending on that with shipping and everything. And they're like, you know what? I don't need a poster. I'll just take a book. I was like, sweet, because hopefully it's a new reader. And then of course, you know, hey, I'm giving you book 2. So if you didn't buy book 1, then hopefully as you start reading through the pages, like, oh, now I'm curious of how we got to this point. So it's just a little bit of that, you know, sharing the story.
Did you get the grand prize winner?
I mean, I reached out, and you know, if they email back saying, hey, yeah, here's this, then cool. And so
what if that person is like, the character's name is Gulpy and he swallows people? Are you going to have to work that in?
So, I mean, I do tailor that, and I do tell people like, hey, at the end of the day, I do have the final call, but I will do my best to bring you out, you know, to bring you in. And I've also done that with 5 other fans who have supported me from the very beginning. I think Ryan Maxwell, who was here earlier. Yeah, Ryan. So like Ryan has a character who's going to be in book 4. I've got, I can see her face. I can't think of her name. She just moved into the Phoenix Valley. She's been a friend of mine for years, who's been a huge supporter. One of my old troops. Again, people who are with me. Nick Boslow in the UK. People who have supported me since the very beginning when I launched. I was like, you know what, you guys? And it's even something as simple as like sharing your Facebook posts, you know, talking about your book, being engaged with your social media stuff. I'm like, you know what, you guys get characters in the book. So here you go. And I'll normally say like, hey, if for some reason I feel like I need to kill this character off because they're in a battle or a fight scene, like, are you okay with that? Or is this like, are you creating a character that you have emotional attachment? Like, this was the name of my favorite dog who I grew up with. And like, all right, well, Scruffy might die in the battle. So So it's just working with those supporters, you know, but it's been a fun thing. Oh,
have you ever,
Jonas? Hey, what's up, brother? Tuning in from Italy.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Have you ever had anyone like from your past, some bully from your past, and so you name a character after him and
absolutely
have a grisly fate?
So not necessarily a bully. Actually Kionis, who's tuning in, Q is one of my troops in the Air Force. He also was a beta reader for me with book 1, and then loved it so much he's like, dude, how can I help? How can I get involved more? So he self-promoted himself into my development editor for book 2 and 3. And now he's actually going to be coming on board and pitching Lucas, my other development editor. He's going to be pitching us his side story. So he will 99% guaranteed sure he's going to start writing a side story within the world of Pentecost. So he's also got a character in book 4, and that's going to be the series that he does. So when he was my troop, I had a supervisor. Not a good mix. And let's just say there's a character in book 3 that was solely dedicated. Oh, my battery's about to die, you guys. So if you see my camera go dark, the stream will keep going. I'll just swap the battery out, but we'll still be here. But yeah, his character was one where I was like, you know what, dude? Here you go. And I don't know, did you ever watch the movie A Knight's Tale?
Oh, I love that movie. Yeah.
It's one of my favorite movies. And one of my favorite lines is when the guy's standing there, he lost all of his clothes in the bedding. And he's like, please, Sir William, will you pay my debt? And da-da-da-da. And he says, I will obliterate you in fiction. I will highlight every character flaw. That movie line has stayed with me throughout my entire military career. And when I was working for the supervisor, I thought of that line meticulously so many occasions. And now I was like, oh, I know exactly what this character is going to be. So, or happen. So yes, I've had 1 or 2 characters that have been highlighted.
Now, how closely did you name him after that character? Is it a similar name, or is it would anyone who was would anyone else put the clues together?
Probably not. No. So one of the funny things, okay, so I have 2 other characters in a current book series I'm writing. So I started my 3rd book series. I'm co-authoring it with another author, and I have 2 doctors at the very beginning of the book. And I took 2 guys that I've served with in the military that I did not care for, and I blended their names together. So the other thing, kind of like Tolkien, where he could like visualize words and he developed his language, I sometimes will look at words as if it's a sound wave, like an arch. So breed or dying. So I'll kind of visualize, okay, so we go up in an arch and then we slowly come down. Well, what would be like dying? So tying or Tyun. Well, Ty gives me that arch, and then Un would give me a drawdown towards the end. So I sometimes will visualize if I wanted to redo a certain word for a name, what would that arch look like, and what other letters and development can I do? So that's something I've done before as well.
Oh, that's really interesting. I've never heard of that before.
Yeah. And well, the other thing, so I have a pronunciation part at the very back of my books. Which takes forever to do. Oh my gosh!
Do you have like a cast of characters, and then you say what each name is, or it's just for pronunciation?
It's for pronunciations. So, spicy, but I spelled it Spycy. So,
okay.
Sporvari. Slythe, Trashic. So I mean, there's probably in both books I've had 100 different words that I've come up with.
Wow.
And so I was
so this is like vocabulary. Do you give a meaning to the word as well, or just the pronunciation?
So just a whole list of pronunciations, and granted, I know it's hard to see with the light, but it's literally Azazel. Well, it's Azel, but it's not Azazel, it's Azazel. So I still, put the pronunciation and I spell out the pronunciation of like, here's how you should be able to read it. And then what I also did was audio record myself saying it, and I put that on my website as well, so you could also play and hear me say it.
Have you had people say, "Hey, thank you for that. It made a difference for me"?
No, not at all. They've come up with their own pronunciations. But the other thing too,
okay,
because I have a voice actor who's recording book 1 right now, and what I've had to come up with was with all of my character illustrations, which people know, in the back of the chapter, there's a character art, a scene, something like that. My illustrator needs to have a little bit of creative liberty. My graphic designer needs to have a little bit of creative liberty. My editor, a little bit of creative liberty. My voice actor, he has some creative liberty, because when you've said Kodgarak for 2 years before anyone else has read it or seen it, it's all oh yeah, Kodgarak was doing this and weird whereas other people be like Kodgarak, okay, just be some grace, because you didn't think of the fact that a reader has not said this word for 2 years and has no idea how to pronounce it.
Yeah.
So that's a part of something as well that I think we as authors don't even think about until you've gotten that experience of future books or readers coming up like, oh yeah, I totally love Kashmez. Kashmez? Yeah, Kashmez is great. Well, what about Dather? Yeah, Dather's really cool too. I like Dather. It just is what it is.
I wonder whether audiobooks, when you get your audiobooks done, how much difference that'll make. Because a lot of folks, I mean, I know some people read and listen to audiobooks at the same time.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure, because I know there are some people that read and listen, and I know a lot of people that are just listening now. So we'll just have to wait and see.
One thing I'm thinking, I was just talking to my dad today about trying, is reading my entire book on YouTube. Like because there's 55 chapters. I think there's 55. Yeah. I'm just looking at my numbers. Yeah, 55 chapters, and usually averaging 2,500 to 3,000 words a chapter, but maybe doing 55 videos or, whatever.
Mhm.
And just saying, hey, this is my gift to you. If you can't afford a book or you just really want to enjoy having the author read it to you, because I do want to do an audiobook as well,
Mhm.
but I'll perform that myself. But I was kind of interested in that idea. I don't know, maybe that would be something for you that would be helpful in the pronunciation regards. So just an idea.
So if you do an audiobook and you have those videos online, you will have to take the videos down. Unless
Oh,
you
this is
do,
this is an important conversation. Oh,
yeah,
okay.
unless you do direct audiobook sales, which you can easily set up through like a PayHip where they buy it's think of like a Square shopping
Yeah.
space, right? They basically click purchase of the audiobook, they pay for the audiobook, and then that automatically sends the file to them to download. So they have the MP3 file. But if you are to
Yeah.
do Audible, they will only allow you, the last time I read through the policy and everything, they will only allow you to have about 10 minutes of free sample for people to listen to on another platform source. So if they, because again, they're trying to generate money and income. If someone
Yeah.
else can listen to it for free, they will basically say, hey, we're taking your audiobook down because,
Now, is
we
that if
want
you're non-exclusive as well,
I'll
or
have
is
to
that if you're
double.
only
I'll have
exclusive?
to double confirm because I know if
Yeah.
you go through like Podium, Atheon, those companies, they will not let you do more than 10 minutes. I believe if you are exclusive to Audible as well, it's the same policy. So
Interesting. Well, I was thinking about going non-exclusive with Audible just because I do like the idea of selling direct,
mhm.
um, and I like the idea. What's that?
Well, I mean, especially if you have that massive following, at a convention, because here's the thing. What people don't understand is one, if you do exclusive to Audible, you do not get to choose how much your audiobook is sold for.
Yeah.
They set that. You're only going to see 30 to 40% royalty. So if you see a book for $10, an audiobook for $10, the author is only getting $3 or $4. If they're going through another company, such as Podium, whatever it is, if there's production costs, if there's royalties that are cut out of that, it lowers all of that down to the author. So for an author to
Yeah.
have an Audible book that they can, an MP3 file that they can sell direct for $5, $6, that's all money coming back directly to the author for all their time.
Yeah. Interesting. I'm glad you said that. I will definitely research it before I take the time to make 55 videos.
Because that's where I
Wow.
was doing something else. I was posting something, and I had another friend reach out. And they're like, "Oh, nope, take that down." Because if Amazon catches you, they will basically ban you, shut you down, and that's a whole nother nightmare. And right now,
Yeah.
Amazon is 80% of the readership, market. So
Huh. Well, that's really interesting. I'll check that out. That's my great idea may not be so great after all. I was like, why doesn't everyone do this? And well, that's why.
yeah, yep, absolutely. Okay, so I guess one or two final questions that I have, if anyone else has more, but what would you do different if you could start over? And while you think of that, I'll swap out my camera battery so it doesn't die.
Sure. If I could start over again, a lot of the lessons I've learned have been. Can you hear me while I'm talking
Oh
to
yeah,
you? Or-
yep, you're good.
Okay. So a lot of lessons I've learned have been as a result of doing things the hard way.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I would make the right choices, or if we're assuming with the knowledge I have now, and I was
Oh,
starting over.
absolutely. Yeah, with the knowledge you have now.
Okay. Well, I would have gone to my second cover designer first. So essentially, you're asking where have I messed up badly enough? I think I would do a better job of writing without feeling the weight of expectations. That was the first time I was, even now I tend to edit while I write, but the first time it was almost crippling because it was like I was writing the world's longest essay for a school teacher to grade, as opposed to just trying to, hey, let me tell a story. And I feel a lot more freedom now. And it's almost like, I don't know if you felt like this on your first book, but I felt like I needed to prove not only to everyone, but to myself that I could tell a story that other people would enjoy and would want to read. And so, like, I've always been a storyteller, but a long form story that requires different acts and an arc and all the moving pieces. And as most things I do tend to get complicated, and my book is no different. It's there's a lot going on, and all the threads are going like this, and some of them are threads for book 2. And so what I would do differently, knowing what I know now, is relax.
Yeah.
And know that this is a process that I can do. And it's a process that can be fun.
Yeah.
And so even, in the past 2 weeks, honestly, I wrote a couple passages I'd been dreading because they're critical to what's going to happen through this, but also the further in the story. And I was like, if I mess these up, if this doesn't work, the back of the story is broken. And I finally trudged my way through it, and I finished. I was like, wait a second, that really wasn't that hard. I should have done that ages ago. And and honestly, I'd skipped ahead and I'd been avoiding those. I've been writing further on, and I finally jumped back. And now I'm enjoying, because that's done, I'm enjoying what I'm writing a lot more. So I've outlined everything. I know.
I wondered if you outlined. I wondered if you were someone who outlined and planned everything out. So,
well, I don't know if you're like me. I outlined everything, and then my characters laughed at me because I started. You know how it is, and like they just go, "No, I'm actually not going to do that."
Right.
And you're like, "No, you're going to do it." And they say, "Okay, but it's going to break it. It's going to break the story." And so every time I try and force that dynamic, it never works out. And so I outline it. And then what I find is like last night when I was telling Sarah, hey, there's this new sport, thug wallop. And it's changed everything about, and she's like, let me sleep. But 48 hours ago, I had no idea that was going to be a thing. And now I can see it clearly. And so so I will tell you this much. I've got in this, I'm looking at the whiteboard in the background. I've got everything, I've got a timeline, and then I have one area. I'm like, there's this whole section going on where I don't know what I'm going to do.
Yep.
And you know what I mean? And I'm just like, you know what? I will figure it out. I've learned that I will figure it out.
For my first series, The Dying Breed, that you know of, I had everything storyboarded for, chapters upon chapters. And I knew, okay, we're going to go here, 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 here. And I was going to keep storyboarding until 2 friends were like, TJ, you have enough. Just start writing. And I thought it was going to be one book, like just one massive honking book. And my development editor, Lucas, was pleading with me, bro, please don't do this to me. Make this a multi-book series. And I'm glad he said that, because I hit save on the manuscript, and that's when the world exploded. And I was like, holy cow, this is huge. I now understand. But the story did start to change. So book 2 and 3 were supposed to be one book together. And it became so big that I then split them. So it's like, okay, 2, 3, and then 4 will be the Cataclysm. And that's what it's called. Dying Breed Cataclysm. Everything's there. But that's where I didn't get the storyboard yet from when I first started. So books 1, 2, and 3 were super easy because I knew everything was going to happen. There's slight deviations, and now I just have like blocks. Like, okay, here. Not really sure how they connect in some part, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So yeah, I totally get it.
And so do you find yourself, you just like, okay, today's the day, let's see what happens. And you're like,
Well,
you're writing in.
so the hard part was I was 70,000 words into book 4 of the series, which would complete the whole saga. I hadn't even picked up where books 2 and 3 left off yet because I was like, I really need a backstory of my villain. Why is he a villain? Why is he doing what he's doing? Because you also need a villain to be understandable or relatable, right? So I was like, I haven't gotten that point yet with Emmanuel. So let's dive into this backstory. And so it's this entire huge backstory. And I was like, exactly where I hit save in the book, that memory, that scene has been with me every day since I hit save. And the reason I say that is because I was challenged by Brian, who was on the stream earlier. Brian Norden came in and was like, dude, I want you to write a series in Lit RPG now. And I bet you can't do 50,000 words in 9 days. And I was like, okay. So I gave him 64,000 words in 8 days. I was like, here you go, dude. So I wrote book 1 of that series. I then have completed book 2 in that series, and I'm starting the side project with this other author. So I'm literally writing my 7th book. I want to get back to book 4. I want to finish that whole saga. It's just the fact of, okay, I've got this momentum going for this book series, so let me get here. And now I'm getting really tired of this book series. I need a break. And this other author, I pitched him this idea, which I really love, because as you know, books 1 and 2 or book series are mature. This 3rd book is all ages. There's no profanity. There's no that. So I was like, this is also a passion project. What I found in that book series, we've started to storyboard it. We have that outline, but I didn't rush it. I have literally slowed down, and I feel like my writing is so much more intentional and so much more well-crafted because I'm not trying to rush a timeline. I'm just, hey, no expectations, just put in some meaning, and I'm really excited for that series. So that's kind of how I've jumped around.
You're so prolific, man. That's awesome.
Well, I'm at the point now where it's basically I will more than likely have to go back into the workforce come January. Depending on there's a lot of factors that are all at play, right? And it's one of these could play out at any point. I don't know, but I know there's at least a hard line that's coming up the end of December, January. So if that means I have 6 months left, you better get as much writing done as you can now and pour into this passion of yours. So I am so excited to get back into The Dying Breed and finish that story. And because I was so like, you see your writing develop, right? So book 1, okay, it's a little rough, book 2, okay, yeah, we got some progress. Keonis was like, dude, book 3 is my favorite book so far. Like you crushed this. Like, this is awesome. And then book 4, I was like, oh man, this is really cool. Like, I love what I was writing. And so I'm just super, you still in tuning in? Yep. And my favorite character, well, not my favorite. One of my favorite characters is in book 3. His name is Drebin. I loved that character so much. I've given Drebin a piece in my other 2 series now, paying homage to that character. So I'm just so excited to get back into book 4. But I think it's one of those things where when I started out writing, I didn't believe in myself. And I know we've talked about this a little bit. I didn't have this pressure of, I need to hit this and I need to like hit this really good. I had the disbelief of, is this even worth it? And I count every single word I write, and I have a total. So I know I'm at 646,000 words written within my career as an author. And I tell people, it doesn't matter if you're going for a walk. It doesn't matter if you're going to the gym, if you're fishing, if you're focusing on a passion project, on a skill that you want to dedicate towards, find a way to track it. So if you walk a mile 5 days a week and you're like, well, what's this worth? Why would I do it? Because in 4 months, when you look back and like, I walked 120 miles. Yeah, you did. You walked 120 miles. So if you're starting out in writing and you're like, man, what is this worth? Like, dude, if you stay committed 18 minutes a day, you will be better than 95% of the world population, because it's a rule of 100. You're going to continue your growth. So after 3 months of just doing 18 minutes a day, you get to look back and like, wow, I wrote 20,000, 30,000 words. Well, if you said, hey, write 30,000 words this week, well, that's really daunting. You know what? Can you just write 500 words a day? Just write 1 page of paper a day. So I've really let go of this pressure. And now I'm at this point of like, you know what, dude, just have some fun, take your time, and just write a beautiful story as best as you can.
Are you doing, as far as marketing goes, do you have more live events coming up? Are you doing like advertising and trying to do direct selling? Like, how are you moving books?
Well, that would be great if I moved books, right? It'd be a different conversation. So right now, the first book in my second series is with a publishing house being reviewed. That is a huge determining factor. If they pick it up, then cool, that's a great conversation. If they don't
hang
pick
on
that,
1 second. Is this a traditional publishing house?
It's a lit RPG indie publishing house. So
okay.
Yep. But I mean, they now have, Brian, his first book was under Legion Publishing. So he was their first author to publish under the house, but they now have 4 authors signed. So they're doing some really cool stuff. So,
wow.
Yeah, I mean, Brian's book, #1 in 2 categories off the bat. So they've got some great stories, some great authors in this house. So that's who is reviewing mine. And we're waiting to see.
You say reviewing, you're not talking about a critical review. You're talking about considering for a publication or acquisition.
Yep.
Okay.
So that was where it was basically, hey, if you like book 1 and you want to bring it on board, guess what? Book 2 is already written. And I've got at least 4 books planned in this series. I already know the storyline. And then I also know a continuation series, which is going to, be a whole new thing. So I'm excited for that. So it's basically, hey, if this is a story that you want to bring on board and do, then guess what? I'll focus my time on that and we'll really hit this. I share that because if it doesn't come to fruition, or when we have our discussion later, more than likely I will put book 1 on a platform called Royal Road, which is a free web novel place. That is then, hey, because you basically upload 1 chapter at a time, and then people can comment on that chapter. So, hey, I love this chapter. I think you should revise this. There's a lot more engagement, but it's also one of those things of, hey, if you really love this story and you want to support me, you can come to my Patreon. And because I have so much work already written, if you want to subscribe to the Patreon, I will start releasing book 2 come, September. So you can start reading book 2 at the same time, or, ahead of schedule, and your funding goes directly to paying for editing and all those other things.
Do you have a Patreon account already?
I have it. I have an account. I have the different tier set up. I have not uploaded work yet. So
Gotcha.
that's my other thing too is, hey, if you loved Call Sign Bloodbath, then I don't know if you want fantasy, but if you come to my Patreon, you're going to get 3.5 books in this series to read. You'll also get 2 books within Bloodbath right off the bat. And then, we can potentially launch this other book series with this other author at the same time. So that is right now the strategy, more than likely, is to build a Patreon page to pay for this. And then also the biggest thing is this audiobook for book 1. More than likely, I know for sure book one, I'll be doing a massive advertising campaign on Amazon, Audible, to try to generate. Also trying to get other people to beta listen, generate interest that way. So that's going to be a major marketing piece. We're about 4 months behind on recording schedule right now, just because, voice actors are people too. They have lives and family events. So hopefully that'll come out. It'll probably be right around the holiday season when that comes out, just in realistic terms, yeah. Right? The other thing with this other series that the author and I are doing together, our goal is to have stuff ready to go up on this Royal Road platform by November timeframe. So what we will more than likely do, I'm already generating all the like audio visual stuff, the little clips we can share on Instagram or Facebook. We'll just start setting up all of our author interviews with all of these other people within this lit RPG space. Try to generate, hey guys, set your calendars, go put this website as your favorite, because we're going to start dropping chapters and just start generating a hype around it, so that we hopefully get an interest to drive to the Patreon and just be like, yep, this is exactly what we want. A superhero story. So starts out Indiana Jones, which then eventually transitions into an Iron Man and Black Panther combination. Alien world, superhero powers, and it's a great. I think it's a great story. I think it's a fun story, and it's what we would use in the lit RPG world of crunchy. There's a lot of stats and data and science that are all played into it. Like, what a rune is, a magical rune. Mm-hmm. I was like, I was working out, and I was at the library. I was having a writers meeting, a local author writers group meeting. And for some reason, I started looking up some stuff, and I had that spark of inspiration. And I text Ryan, and I'm like, dude, I'm sending you something. As soon as I get home, I got to put it up on PowerPoint. And I basically came up with the magical chemical construction of how you put a rune together within this world. It's basically like, think of like a DNA strand. And I don't want to give too much spoiler away, but I was like, dude, this is exactly how you magically and organically can put a rune together. This is how it works. And he's like, oh, that's dope. And so then he, of course, ran with it. He's like, okay, I'm going to go do all this stuff. And da-da-da-da. I was like, all right, cool. So, yeah. So we'll have a massive thing there. As far as the current books, I haven't done any paid advertising. More than likely, depending on some other stuff, if I can get book 3 edited and ready to go for publication, I'll probably do the first 2 books for free on Kindle Unlimited. And just try to get that. Yeah. Well, it's kind of 20 books to 50K, right? Hey, guess what? I need to get some type of motivation, some type of more followership to really engage and find me as an author. So guess what, guys? Book 3 is dropping on Kindle Unlimited, but also Kindle. The first 2 books on Kindle are free for a month. So jump on it, read these books, get them now while you can, and generate that interest.
So how many books do you have right now, like, that are ready to go to sell this today?
2 books are published right now. Book 3 needs copy line editing, graphic or copy line, and all the cover work. And then book 1 and 2 of my Monmouth series need copy line editing.
Have you ever considered direct sales?
Yes. So I do have direct sales through my Facebook, where basically it's a Square app. And, people, if they want a signed copy of the book, they can buy it through there.
Because I've seen some other author friends who have multiple books out that have made that work for them in a big way. And they went from like not selling a lot of books to like selling a lot of books. Well, by my standards,
Right.
And it's when I have multiple books out, like 3 books, hopefully in the near future, that would be my approach. I like Patreon. I think that's a really, especially for someone, like myself, who I really enjoy a variety of creative outlets. I think that could be a way to engage people in a good way. But it does seem to me that Patreon is becoming a very like mainstream. People, it's not like a weird, oh, what's that? And it's more like, oh yeah, this is a creator, I want to support him. Like it's the other thing I would encourage you to check out. I don't know how this could apply to you, but you've got so many new projects coming. Check out Kickstarter. There's a Facebook group called Kickstarter for Authors.
Okay.
And it's run by a lady named Anathea Sharp. And she was next to me at the 20 books to 50K Vendors Day. And she was my neighbor. And she was so cool and invited me to her group. She's putting out a book about how to run a good Kickstarter. But
okay. I think I've heard of it.
It'll be out next month. But it's really encouraging to see people running successful programs, campaigns to finance and actually make a profit on books that they're releasing. And since you've got so many things, so many irons in the fire, I don't know what that could look like for you, but I would encourage you to at least join the Facebook group and see what they're talking about. Because it's really, especially because Brandon Sanderson had that last one last year with like $42 million. And, there's a lot in the book community, there's a lot of movement around Kickstarter that is positive.
So also fundmycomic.com.
Oh, okay.
That is a new, yep. So obviously their focus is comic books, but you can also do graphic novels, manga, books, magazines, TTRPGs, board games, video games, etc. So it was basically, we were seeing how there's kind of this movement on Twitter. I don't know if you've heard of it, Iron Age. So Iron Age, Alan, who was here earlier, is very big into the movement, very big person that's connected to this movement, where it's basically indie creators. We're in this Iron Age of media, and indie creators are the ones who need to step up and support one another, because we are sick of the mainstream and the traditional, and just some of the terrible storytelling, some of the terrible movies and products. And so it's this movement of like, dude, indies need to support indies, and we need to do this. So some people have found not as great success on Kickstarter, where they don't feel like they're getting the support from the entity itself. And so that's where Fund My Comic was really launched, from an indie perspective, to bring this indie culture support and help one another. So it's just another platform. And that's actually what I'm thinking of doing for potentially book 3 or some others, of just saying, guys, if you help me here, you can get a free copy of the ebook, or if you donate this much, we'll absolutely hook you up with this. So that is something that I'm considering. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, great. I look forward to seeing how that plays out, because I think it's I like that the platform is what you make it. So I think there's opportunities there, but it's also going to take someone with enough creativity to leverage it in a way that will work for them. So,
right. Speaking of 20 books, are you going this year?
Probably not. Reason is, are you going?
I am, yeah. So I was actually given a scholarship to it for a free attendance. So.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
So I have a big craft fair. The Fountain Hills Craft Fair is like the Friday right after that week. So it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And so I would have to leave on Thursday, and then I have to set up and so it's like 200,000 people come to that craft fair, and I sold a lot of books last year.
Wow.
And so between that and I think I had something else right around then, it was like the other thing is I'm looking at where there's a possibility that Voyage 4 is going to be happening, where we're talking about trying for Australia again, or New Zealand.
Okay.
And so that would be, if that happens, that'll be in early 2024.
Okay.
And so with that in mind, I've been gearing all of I'm like, all right, well, I'm trying some new shows out, and I'm trying to get into Las Vegas Comic-Con, which is December 1st, I think. And so anyhow, I've been like cramming shows. And so for this year, the 20 books thing, because I have 2 kids. And so we actually, figuring out all that childcare would have been a pretty epic challenge.
Right.
But you're going to love it. I'm so glad you're going, because you're going to,
Yeah.
the best thing about it, because all the seminars are online, you can watch them all
Mhm.
later.
Yep.
But the best thing about it is the people you meet, the other authors, and those relationships. Yeah. And so you're going to knock it out, man. You're going to meet some great people.
So I went there for one night last year just to hang out with Brian, who was in the chat earlier, because he was coming over from Ireland. And I was like, dude, I got my poster of Golgoth printed up. I'll come deliver it to you, because I was going to ship it to him. And he's like, no, man, that'd be too expensive. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Well, now I'm just going to spend like $120 on gas and a night in the hotel. I could have just shipped it to you for 30, but we're going to hang out. So I drove up there, hung out with him, met some incredible other authors, which I know you wouldn't know them, but like Matt Dinneman, Eric Ugland, Seth Ring, all these guys hanging out with them.
I've heard of Seth Ring.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I got to sit right next to Seth and talk to him, and while we were having milkshakes. And so that's where I was like, dude, I got to come back to this conference. Like, this would be epic. So I put in for Tucson Comic-Con, and right after our show, and of course there was already a waiting list, so I haven't gotten in. But then I had some other lit RPG authors like, dude, you got to come to Dragon Con. Get out to Atlanta, come to Dragon Con, hang out, have fun. So I'm going out to Dragon Con, and then I'll have 20 books. So those are my 2 big events for the rest of the year.
Oh, that's great. Now, are you selling at Dragon Con or just attending?
No, just attending, just hanging out.
Okay. I've heard great things about it. I would love to go to that one, because it's one of the biggest ones out there, isn't it?
Yeah. So that's where, if I could do it all again, I would definitely have switched a lot of my priorities up, dedicated. I spent a lot of money on some things that I really shouldn't have. I should have diverted, but doing at least one convention to get experience under your belt, but then setting up and going for Dragon Con, Dragon Steel, and the 20 bucks to 50K just to go. I would say those 2 conventions, if you are in the fantasy space, would probably be the most fruit-bearing for people who are within the fantasy scene.
I think some of it is what your goals are too, though.
Oh, absolutely.
The challenge, for example, that trade, that craft fair I was telling you about in Fountain Hills with all the people, I think there's one other author who went, and everyone else is like selling custom built grandfather clocks that are the most beautiful things you've ever seen crafted from wood. And then the guy next to me was selling pottery. He was so cool. His name was what was his name? Oh, it was like Jude, something like that. Coolest guy I've ever met. And then on the other side of me is a fellow who makes wind chimes, and his name's Sean. Really great guy. And anyhow, the point being, there are sometimes advantages to being the only author at an event, because other people will take a chance on, hey, all right, I like reading. I don't necessarily like this, but I'll give it a shot. And so I've had really good encounters in that situation, but also, like you saw at Fan Fusion, there were, how many authors were there? Like, 50?
It's great. Like, if you're just the 1 or 2 author, if you're a book reader, guess what? You only have 2 options. 2 people to come talk to, depending on the venue. Hey, there's nothing but 2,000 authors here. How do I stand out from the crowd?
Yeah. So I guess it depends what your goals are. At this point, I feel like this is, like everyone says, but it really is, it's a marathon. And, you have to keep it with that mindset. And even if you go back to the workforce, your books are evergreen. They're still going to be working for you.
Yep.
And so and you never know what could take off or what's going to pay off. But you can't go wrong with investing in people and always adding value to them. And so you have a newsletter, a mailing list, and
so I started the newsletter. I don't really email it out like every week. it's about every 2, maybe 3 weeks, right? And just, hey, here's some updates. So like I'll send them the covers for some of the books coming up because we already have concept covers. So like, hey, here's the concept, here's the blurb, here's what you get first access to because you wanted to be an email, news subscriber. So there's that. And then doing these live streams where, hey, every week, I try to do every weekend. I was doing them on Wednesdays at first, found that was really hard for people's schedules. So now we're trying Sundays and then generating that on YouTube and generating that and then building TikTok. So it's just literally you're having to build. When you start out in this, you can't just go buy a house and instantly get to live in it. Hey, I got to find a plot of land. Now I've got to make sure it's zoned. Now I've got to lay a foundation of concrete. Now I've got to put my piping in, my electrical in. I've got to do the framing. You've got to build your house over time. And so literally it's just going a lot slower. And so
sometimes the house is haunted and you have to start over again.
Right. Yeah. The ground was a burial ground that you didn't know about and it's haunted. So I think my biggest thing right now is I've generated a lot of suspenseful, patient anticipation for my audiobook. And I've got a friend of mine, Tom Cox, who he and I went to church together. I mean, he's, in his 50s now. And we always joke that Tom Cox should narrate audiobooks. And my audiobook narrator, Peter Wicks, who was out of the UK, he came to me and he's just said, TJ, I'm really sorry, man. I have to back out. I love doing audio narration. I love your story. I love everything. But right now, for me to dedicate the time and resources to doing an audiobook is not worth it for me with all my other projects. Because he was doing video game, television commercials. Like he was doing a lot. And so he's like, I love it. I know it's not going to be best for me. So the next week, Tom posted on his Facebook, hey, I'm starting to do voice narration for hire. So if anyone's got any projects, hey man, you interested? And sure enough, he's going with it. And he's already dedicated for the whole series, book 2. So that's where for me, the audiobook market has doubled in followership usage. So right now, books, the trend is going to audiobooks. So for me, it's, hey, if I can generate enough interest and we just hit it hard, hopefully that is at least the thing that takes off for me to fund and generate the next one. So
yeah.
So we'll see. And again, like I said, if I go back to the workforce, when I was writing book 3, I was working a full-time job. So I was getting up at 3 a.m. and I would either go to the gym and work out and then go to work and then write in the evening time, take the laptop out to the living room, type away while, mom sits on the couch, we watch TV, we do time, whatever. Like whatever this family dynamic was, it was, this is what I want to do. How bad do I want it? And how much will I dedicate towards it? So I was getting up at 3 a.m. and either writing or working out. So that's where, hey, if I truly have to get back to the workforce, I'm still going to write. I will write. I will get this. And the other biggest thing right now is waiting to see what VA disability may come back for me. Because, as we know, there's a certain number. If that VA can come back at that number, then I can continue to write and do this full time and just, all right, eventually one of them will take off. Or there'll be a lot of doorstops that we can give out at conventions, as you and I used to joke about. So, yeah.
No, I think it's great, man. Congrats on being prolific and having so many positive things in the fire. That's really good.
Oh, thanks, man. But yeah, so all right, guys. So my record on the stream has been 3.5 hours. We will not try to beat that record because we are just under 3. But guys, seriously, Debunked. I'm also about a huge thing of Bookmas 2023, Book Christmas. So again, hey, I'm not a huge steampunk or adventure reader. I'm more of a romance. Okay, well, do you have a cousin? Do you have a niece, a nephew, a brother, sister, a neighbor? This is an awesome book. I'm thoroughly enjoying it. It's going to be 5 stars, 100%, because it's such a great story. So be sure to pick up Debunked. All of Dito's links are in the description of this video. So if you want to connect with him on Facebook, Instagram, his website, where you can buy the special editions and get all the packaging directly from him. Definitely go check him out there. So, Dito, thanks, brother, for coming and hanging out with us.
Thank you guys. And I really appreciate the opportunity. And it's good to see you again, TJ. And I'm rooting for you, man.
Thanks, man. All right, guys. Well, we will tune out here. So thanks for those who tuned in, and we will see you hopefully next week.